And then I remember, like, not too long after that, not being able to get, like, oxys and never considering stopping the effort until I got one. That was a turning point for me. Like, I remember.
No choice.
Like, I'm
No
going
choice.
to get my hands on this.
Yes.
Or I'm not going to stop trying until that happens. There
Right.
is no take a time out for 4 hours and try to sleep.
Above. So, welcome to Dancing on a Volcano, episode 5. I'm here with Paul Collins.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, brother. And thank you for taking the time to come out and sit with us.
I'm excited. Cool. This is fucking so official in here, man.
Yeah, well, you know what? Like, what I find is that when you treat things officially, people also treat it officially. If you handle it like it's like your side hobby and we were doing this on my couch, I mean, we probably still get a similar result. But when people walk in and they see the organization, they feel like the energy that was put into setting it all up. Yeah. They tend to bring a little bit, they treat it with a, they avoid the minimum of concern approach. All right. So, Paul and I met, I think, at some point in a church basement.
Yep.
Right. So, I think we came in right around the same time, my brother. You might be just a month or two behind me, but it was real close.
Handful of recent milestone.
Right. Yeah. I just celebrated 11.
Yeah.
Right,
congratulations. So. I had 10 in March.
Okay.
So yeah, like.
All right. So I've got an interesting story about you, and that's a great segue. So
nice.
So, you come into recovery, at least for me, I'll keep it on me. I had low self-esteem and low self-worth, right? You know what I mean? And I really didn't feel well embraced by my peers or, that was my history. So I arrived in recovery, and to be well embraced was really kind of a different thing for me. Mm-hmm. And what I realized was that, my story was relatable, and the result that I got in terms of other people, I felt well embraced. And over time, a little bit more and more and more, I just peeled back any resistance I had to the vulnerability that, really gave other people the ability to relate to me and to get closer to me and that type of thing. And then I got to a point where I was really letting it all hang out. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like I was, I felt like I was blowing people's wig back, and it felt really good. And then you came in to speak at, you know what I mean? Like you might have had like a year clean or something like that. And I had known you in passing, but I hadn't heard your story. And you came in and blew my fucking wig back. And I was like, and the cool thing about that was, and there was two things that went on simultaneously. One was like, yo, that was really cool. And then the other thing was like, you see, motherfucker, you ain't cool. There's many other motherfuckers here who blow your motherfucking wig back too.
I was probably trying to be just like them.
Well, and you know what? And frankly, me too. And what's happened over time is in an interest of, being authentic and also being more approachable, removing a little bit more of the boom and sizzle and just getting to the core of.
Absolutely.
So I was really interested in, because now, with a lot of time has elapsed since that, and I know that, the metamorphosis and change in me has really been an after effect of a 12-step process. And frankly, we won't mention either any of the fellowships or whatever. Right. We'll just keep it there. But that has, ultimately changed me. And that after effect has metamorphosized my message. And I've gone from, kind of like this, breakdown process of the steps and how it all really works to being an example of recovery in my life. And so one of the reasons why initially I thought it would be a really good idea to interview you is, and what I find is that, one end of this is, dude, we're fucking alive and breathing. It's a goddamn miracle.
Hell yeah.
Right.
Man.
So there you go. Yeah. Right. You know what I mean? I know your better half. I remember at one of the first meetings I saw her in, fresh off life support.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I was like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like it was and then, knowing that you two ended up together, there was like a really cool thing going on, and we'll get to that. But realizing on one side that, and I am interested in, volcano stories that lead to life, right? Like but what I also find compelling is volcano stories that lead to life and a whole lot more. Right? Yeah. Building a fruitful life, right? You know what I mean? Which includes, You know, and let's face it, you know, we say in recovery, we have one promise and many gifts. The one promise is freedom from active addiction. Everything else is a bonus, right? But I also thought, and I've said this before in a recording, that, you know, one of the things that I've always felt almost saddened about, and all of us know addicts who basically have squandered the gift that they've received. Right.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, you know, what I find more compelling, and people I trying to get in the seats more, and I'll put a lot of people here, are people that I want to spend time with. Right. And also people that I think ultimately to dance on the volcano is to stand in the threshold of the heat, right? To survive. And then the dancing part is to lead a fruitful life.
Yeah.
Right. So, so I know you got a volcano story. I ain't no fucking question about that. And we're going to go
like
there.
I'm still on the volcano.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And that's at least something that your sponsor and my sponsor have told me.
Yeah.
Right? And we share a sponsor.
Yeah.
And I found that out today, which I didn't know,
Super
which is
cool,
really,
man.
really
Yeah,
cool.
That's my guy.
And we'll have him in here at some point.
Yeah.
But one of the things that, you know, we talk about the gift of desperation, right? And one of the things that's really cool is, and just maybe within the last few years, you know, maybe even more frequently in the last year, to realize that the gift of desperation comes over and over and over again.
Oh God. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it does.
And without that gift of desperation, I am less enticed to change things that are unmanageable in my life.
Yeah.
So, you know, and we're gonna dance all over this motherfucker. So, where are you from originally?
I'm from the Delco-y part of Delco.
Yeah, the Delco-y part. Where,
right.
What would you consider? What are we? Darby?
Prospect Park.
Okay.
So I'm a product of a Darby dad and a Sharon Hill mom that made it all the way down Chester Pike to Prospect Park to, you know, to raise a. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So
I heard it vibrate.
You know, we got to keep things running a little bit from the phone perspective. You never know when you're gonna catch an emergency. You got kids.
Nah, they can wait. So. That's fine.
All right.
And yeah, so I grew up Prospect Park, right by the airport. You know, like that part, like right off the highway.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I had, you know, just for the sake of saying it, man, just to like shout out my folks. My parents are still married.
Okay.
My parents have been married. The anniversary was in October. 43 years.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
And they've been together like way before that. You know.
Okay.
It's like a Bonner Prendy thing. Like it's like the most Delco fucking love story. You know. So yeah, I mean that's where I'm from. I mean the accent is like it's a little more there than my wife's. I would say she's kind of like shaking hers over the years.
Right. Right.
Mine in certain things it just like comes out a little more. Right. Especially with like any kind of recording, I feel like it'll be very evident.
Right.
Where I'm from certain words. You know.
Well, it depends. See, for us, like the ability to be able to identify those nuances comes from being kind of from here.
Right.
Like once we get, you know, the people that'll watch this from Cali, you just sound like you're from Philly.
Right.
They can't really
Yeah, they don't get like
they can't really identify.
Yeah, like the hoagie, like the whole thing.
They won't pick that piece up. So and you know what? And in the interest of authenticity, we'll just let it all fucking hang out.
Yeah.
So now your mom and dad stayed together.
Somehow, as much as I tried, apparently to split them. Yeah.
Brothers and sisters?
Younger brother, 6 years younger than me.
Okay.
Who is not one of us. Has just like, I mean, this dude, he still has like his communion money. Like he's just always been like a good kid.
Okay.
You know, he's like responsible.
So you're the black sheep.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
All right, cool.
There was no hiding it either. There's nobody even in like second place. Like, it was like it was the whole podium of black sheepedness was just all versions of me throughout my growing up.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
No aunts or uncles to really take it from me. Like it was just me.
Right.
Like I was a tornado. Like in all that kind of stuff and like the whole larger family like dynamic. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
So mom and dad got along for the most part, and you know what I mean? Like there was a strife or...
Yeah. Well, I mean, so now I didn't know growing up.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I didn't know. I knew I was loved, Did we say it all the time or not? I don't know. It didn't need to be said. I knew that.
Right.
I felt
Right.
that.
Okay.
You know, I mean, my parents were, my upbringing, as far as I knew, was great. You know, I didn't know anything other, but just as a parent now myself, knowing the challenges that role like presents, I now, you know, they're still alive. I like ask them for advice, you know, because I think they did a good job. So it's who I ask advice of, people who I would want to do that level of you know. So, and when they tell me things now about like troubles they've had or like struggles they were going through, I'm like, I had no idea. But now but just going through a marriage and adulthood and all that stuff myself, I'm like, of course you were.
Right.
Of course it was hard for you.
It comes with the turf.
Right. Like you just made it look easy, which,
Right.
you know, shout out to them, man. Shout out to Mayor and Paul making it look easy.
Right.
When in hindsight, it was not.
Right.
You know, like you fucking drug addict kid. Like it's not easy. That's a hard, a hard, you know.
And that's only really a piece of it.
Just a piece.
That's a piece of the, you know, just the natural struggles that humans go through.
Yeah.
And frankly, for me, at least in part, like, I talk to my therapist about it all the time. You know what I mean? Like, you know, the use of substances represents a fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And that fantasy represents an inability to cope with, like, I was always like, okay, coping with difficulties and, you know, and these things and those things are hard. And, you know what I mean? And
it's
just
reality.
to realize that life.
That's the difficulty.
Like yes, exactly. Is life. And, you know, coming to realize, you know, after, you know, as Al would say, you know, we ain't got the patent on good ideas. He also says we don't have the patent on kindness or humility or like those things too. And realizing that, you know, that struggles are a human evolution. They're not really, you know, we as addicts, through an inability to accept personal responsibility, magnify those things and make them far worse.
Yeah.
But, you know, you really realize as time's gone on that, you know what I mean, that all the people around us suffer and they all have their own struggles and they all have their own difficulties. And so,
yeah, it's one of the trippiest parts about being an adult is realizing that the adults that raised me, whatever, were also people, and they weren't put here solely to just do the parenting job of me. And they were also, you know, they were 30s, 40s-year-olds, like trying to like elevate in their career, trying to make sure they had enough money, trying to go to the shore every year. That was our big trip, was a week at the beach, you know, trying to do the schlep to all the sports after school, after working all day, like thinking about what's for dinner every night. I mean, you know, when you're an adult, I don't know, man. I mean, just my wife, we joke about this all the time, my wife and I. It'll be like 3, 4, 5 o'clock, whatever, and we just cannot believe it's dinner time again already, every day.
Right.
And we feel like this is some massive cross to bear, that we just have to eat something like every night. And it's not the eating of it, it's the deciding or what are we going to do.
I go through the same thing.
And just realizing that my folks also had to do that every day. I'm just like, wow, man, like I thought you were there to just like get me to basketball practice and like make sure I like, you know, had on clean clothes and like got good grades and like did all this kind of stuff. But you were also, your own life was happening at the same time.
I have this tactic, and so I'm on recording, so I probably shouldn't say this, but my latest tactic so my wife will be like, what do you want to eat? And I'll be like, I don't know. What do you want to eat? She'll be like, oh, I don't know. And then it's like we go back and forth. You know what I mean? So what I've really come to realize is that no response that I have is going to be acceptable anyway.
Right.
So my new tactic, and shut up, Robin, if you're watching this, is she'll say, well, what do you want to eat? And I'll just fire something off real quick, like tacos or pasta or pizza or whatever, knowing full well that her response is going to be that she's not going to want that.
Right.
And now it's kind of like I serve that volley back into her space, and then I'm like, well, you don't want what I want anymore, so you figure it out.
Yeah.
Right? You know, and, you know, it's kind of like a way, because I realize that, you know, that as much as I'd like that to be a collaborative effort, you know, my suggestions of what we should do there sometimes, and in the interest of, like, she's taking the kid out tonight, so she's cooked dinner already. So when we go home today, there'll be dinner at home.
Mm-hmm.
So she's solid that way. But
Right.
So all right. So let's rewind a little bit, right? So you're like me, right? So there was a point where let me speak for me. Like I had a discomfort,
Mm-hmm.
right? With who I was, right, and I wanted to fit in,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that was long before I ever touched a substance.
Mm-hmm.
So so when was the first time that you really kind of decided that, or touched or tinkered with or fucked with, like where was the first taste
Of the discomfort, or of
well,
using
first
a
of all,
substance to mask it?
first discomfort, like when did you, is there a point now in your exploration where you realize kind of you've identified like where that time frame was?
Yeah, I don't know chronologically which of these happened first.
Right.
But there's several things that I remember as a kid that I'm now knowing what I know. I'm just like, oh, that's what that was. At
Right.
the time, of course, I'm a kid. I'm talking young kid.
Right. Me too. I relate
Like
to
I
that.
remember being grade school age young and being so curious about what other kids like thought about when they separated from the pack. Like when they went home and they were just like at their house, like you know what I mean? Not with all the
Now,
other
did you
kids
fit
anymore.
into the pack, so to speak? Like, did you?
I tried hard to.
Right.
I felt like I did. I felt like I was fortunate enough to pick like the right groups to try to fit into. And
Did you chameleon up a little bit so that you could blend into them?
as I got older, yeah.
Yeah.
When you're young, it's like, if you're a boy, you're at the park playing sports. If you're a girl, you're at the park watching the boys play sports. That was my childhood.
Right,
You know what I
right,
mean? It's like
right.
I grew up in a neighborhood full of kids. A lot of houses had a lot of siblings.
Right.
I mean, you would ride past like somebody's house. There would be 30 bicycles on the front lawn. Like
Right.
it was really like that, which was a great thing. It was a great place to grow up, But as I got older, yeah, like I would hang out with all different kinds of groups of kids.
Right.
And as long as they were doing drugs, that was the
Right,
thing. It's like,
right.
hippies did these drugs. So if I was in the mood for that, I'd hit up my hippie friends. I then, in high school, there was like the rave crowd,
Right.
Because I'm like that age.
Yeah.
So if I
They're
wanted
all
to do
rolling
that,
and eating the E, and you're
that
like,
was-
yeah,
I
let me
didn't
get-
mind
yeah,
that.
right,
You know what I
okay,
mean?
Right.
there was like the druggies, hippies that would do
Right.
like not just smoke a bunch of weed. They would like do acid and stuff. I
Right.
liked that.
Right.
And then I had like my boys, like my real people that I hung with, where we would booze ourselves into the ground, and
Right.
then other stuff would come along. You know what I mean? Like we would like do coke, like party drugs or whatever. But like we would like look for like trouble, basically.
Right.
So yes, I mean I would chameleon, but I was who I was wherever. I was the last one trying to do all the drugs, like wherever I went.
So you went from what in the beginning drinking and smoking weed, and then
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
Do you remember how old you were when you got started with all that?
Yeah, first time I got drunk was an accident. First
Okay.
time I got drunk was an accident. We used to have block parties,
Okay.
right? And they put like they block off the street
Right.
and all
right.
the houses. Like it was a big deal in my neighborhood,
Right.
the block parties. And there was like, which I now know are Jello shots, but there was trays of these little cups of Jello in the fridge in my house.
How old were you?
Like 8, 9.
Oh yeah, you're
8,
like,
9.
oh look,
And
Jell-O.
it was me and my man Slim and my cousin, and we were just like sick. Look at all this Jell-O, I guess. You know what I mean? And we just
Right.
started like eating all this, because when you're that young, there's no way for you to even imagine
Right.
that an older person would think to make that not for a child. Like there's no version of Jell-O
Right,
that's not
right,
for a kid.
Right.
It's
right.
for kids and elderly people. That's
Now
what
as a
Jell-O's
segue,
for.
or just as are you concerned about edibles with regards to raising a daughter now? You know what I mean? Like what that could potentially turn into, thinking full well that those things are typically identified as, things for children. And, now that they're lacing everything with fent.
Yeah, not so much. Not in my house. I'm not
Okay.
concerned about it.
Well, me
And
either,
Not in the
but-
house that she goes to.
Right,
I'm not concerned
right,
about it.
right.
So as she gets older, that will be. Yeah, I'm sure the concern level will increase.
Right.
But as of right
Right.
now, like, nah, man. I mean, if I if somebody's gonna bring edibles into my house, I would tell them to paint them up like broccoli, and my kid would be safe from it forever. You know, just make it look like a bag of green beans, dude. You don't gotta worry about her eating shit.
I love it. That's fantastic.
So we eat all the Jello to finish.
Right.
You know, we eat all the Jello, and you know, and now we're drunk. Now there's 3 drunk 9-year-olds. You know what I mean? At the block party, which the adults thought was like hilarious because you know, and you know, and we partied, man. They let us stay up late. Like we were like, I remember laying on my front lawn and being like, now that I know, I've identified, I'm like the adults. I'm drunk. I'm like altered, you know?
Right.
And I like this.
Right.
Like I like how this feels. I like the attention I'm
like
getting.
Like a rite of passage type situation.
I felt like one of them.
Yes.
You know, I'm like, now I'm asking for sips of beer. I hated beer. Like, I wasn't a kid that liked beer. I'm asking my dad's like, for what? You hate beer.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm like, but it's cool. You know, it was like cool. Probably only had like a couple Jello shots. I don't know. I mean, if I had like a bunch of them, I would have probably had to go to the hospital. But I remember the attention we got. I remember how much we laughed. And I remember it was like when we woke up the next day and like the street was no longer blocked off and there was no longer like a band or like tables in the middle of the street. And I was like, oh, we're just like back to regular life here.
Right.
I was like bummed.
Right.
You know,
right.
Like, I need to recreate that magical
fantasy,
moment.
Magical.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? Like,
and I started stealing booze. I started stealing booze. We were so young when we were drinking. My whole neighborhood now was into it.
Right.
Because, you know, once a couple of us started, then, you know.
Then everybody was in.
Yeah.
Right,
we were still playing tag, but we would play tag like drunk. We were young enough to play kid games, but like we were doing adult things.
Right.
You know, so that was kind of like how it started for me. Like I intentionally, after that, would seek out opportunities to like hit my parents' liquor cabinet up and like go like drink a little with my friends, like whatever. You know what I mean?
Were you like me? Were you replacing alcohol with water in certain bottles so they didn't notice? Because my dad had a bar built in the house, so it was like, you know, so I could mix it up between different bottles, and you know what I mean?
I would do that until I got caught. I would get caught all the time. I got caught doing everything I ever fucking did, bro. And I was just like a fucking idiot. And until my mom, she couldn't hold it anymore. She's like, you know, water sticks to the side of the bottle,
right?
And the alcohol doesn't,
right?
Like you do know that, don't you?
Right.
And I was like, you know, plead the fifth. But from then on, no, I would just steal it. I would delete the whole bottle because you can't tell me there's less in there if the bottle's not there for you to cite as evidence.
Right.
So I would do that. We would mix weird shit, dude. Like I bring it out like a Tupperware. You know, I'll just take like a little sip of everything, throw it in like a wonton container, and show up at the park like, here it is, what it is. Like this is what we're drinking. You know, dude, it was terrible.
I'm thinking about. It's an interesting thought process. Is that. So my dad was a fire chief, and you know he worked in a lab at Merck making vaccines, and he was kind of like, you know, because he found out at a young age he was type 1 diabetic, and they gave him a short time span, so he tried to jam multiple lives into one, and he couldn't drink because he was type 1. So you know he had this bar in the house, and you know Christmas time we'd have everybody over or whatever, and we had this, you know, these. Looked like an hourglass, and it said fire and water on them. He's calling fire and water shots, and you would pour the shot in the bottom, and then the alcohol on the top, and suck it down, and the shot would smack behind it. It was all in one, and that was like a game for them. And then he was bringing in. He didn't even really drink because he couldn't, but it was like a social thing. And then he got he would buy a third of a gallon or half a gallon of maraschino cherries. And he would go to Merck, and they would manufacture pure grain alcohol, and so they could sterilize the vats to make.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like we're
not
talking about. We're not talking about grain like you know, like ding 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 make it grain. We're talking about, you know, they use it to sterilize the vats before they make you know, pharmaceuticals. And he'd come home with that, and he would take the maraschino juice and dump it out and fill that thing with grain alcohol and put the lid on it, put it under, and he'd break it out a couple months later and take the lid off of it, and all those cherries were clear. He literally bleached the red right out of the cherry.
Right.
And he would mix drinks for people, and chuck one of them, they call it cherry bomb, and chuck one of them things at the bottom of your drink. And people will be drinking and get to the bottom of the drink and eat that cherry and get a shot of pure grain.
Yeah, man.
I was like, come on over, guys.
Yeah.
Eat some of these cherries. We were all passed out all over. It was just, we were destroyed because of those things.
Yeah.
But you really realize that the influence, that inadvertent influence that parents have with all the best of intent makes it to children. And, your conversation about, about how, the block party and those type of things, like me too, like I can relate to that. And frankly, also just wanting to be adult or part of. And once I started, like trust and believe, like the other kids in the neighborhood were like, yeah, Jimmy got the good, you know what I mean? Like, it made me the man, even at a young age, you know what I mean? And I didn't really realize and my parents were the type of people that were like, if you're going to drink, just drink here. Like, don't go out there. You know what I mean? Like
I did not have those parents.
Oh yeah, they were more restrictive that way, or
yeah, they were like, "That's illegal, you idiot! Like, why are you doing that?"
I think they were realists. I think they knew that I was going to anyway, so they were just trying to create some sort of a semi-safe space. Yeah. But that didn't really work. So, so when did it transition from into becoming some level of? I mean, we won't go so far as unmanageable. But, it sounded like
it was unmanageable early, bro.
Right.
Yeah, it was unmanageable early.
And you're a garbage head coming out of the gate pretty much.
Hell yeah.
Me too. So you eventually reach a point where now you're in high school, right?
Middle school. I mean, once weed came in, I was like, I guess like middle school, early middle school, grade school, I don't know, however old you are.
Right.
And, and we were like we were like skater kids, man. You know what I mean? Right. So we would go into the city all the time. Like, we would take the train to the city like every day after school when we were like 12, 13. It was like very common.
Right.
So then you start getting weed while you're in the city, and you don't get it from like the nice hippie fella that lives around the corner that like your boy's older brother knows. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're just getting nicks now.
Right.
And then you're smoking wet, and then you're doing like, and it just kind of happened like that for me. So whatever was there, I would always be like, no. Like there was always like a line in the sand that always got smudged out. And then I would just go a little further, and then I put another line in the sand. And then when I was ready, I would do that thing, and I would smudge it out, and I would go a little further. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but by high school, I mean, charges, cases, like dumb shit, but still like, you know what I mean? Consequences.
Right.
Not being able to do things I wanted to do, right? Like I got kicked off the basketball team, of which I was the captain my senior year when I was hoping to play basketball in college.
Right.
And getting looks. So it was like just stuff like that, man. You know what I mean? Like I just couldn't not shoot myself in the foot with using like over and over and over and over again. You know? Yeah.
So now out of high school, what did you do then? Did you, like charges get in the way of jobs and things like that? I mean,
no, I went to college.
Okay. Where'd you go to school?
Temple.
Okay. You went to Temple?
I cosplayed.
You attended?
I cosplayed as a Temple student for like a year or two.
Uh-huh.
But even there, like, water finds its own level, right?
Right.
So, like, I'm at Temple. I meet these dudes that I think are, like, these, like, nerdy, like, frat-type dudes.
Right.
And I happen to find, like, the, like Sosa's Palace of fraternities, where it's just, like, this crazy Coke scene and, like, everybody's, like, doing all this crazy shit. So I just like that's what I always like gravitated towards one way or another without it ever even coming up or like so that was short lived. I didn't do good in school. I didn't go to a lot of classes.
Yeah.
Had to kind of like tuck tail, come back to mom's and try to like go to community, get a job, like all that.
What did that look like? First jobs, really, that you got into?
Blah, it sucked. All my early jobs were bullshit.
Right.
My first job ever, I worked at a car dealership where it was in the dead of winter, man. Like, I started, like, a couple weeks before Christmas. It's probably like 14. And all they had me doing was washing cars.
Right.
In the dead of winter.
Right.
Like, we live in the Northeast, man. Like, the water was, like, freezing up, I'm like, is this work? This sucks.
Well, what did Dad do?
So my dad, he was an accountant of some sort for it used to be Scott Foam, it was Scott Paper before that. It was like, and then it
Right.
became whatever it became, like as it moved
Right.
around. But he started there like sweeping floors, pushing buttons on machines, and ended up being like a regional accounting
Right.
somebody.
And
you
mom
know?
stayed at home?
Nah, mom was FedEx for like
Right.
40 years.
Wow.
Okay. Just like, yeah. She used to work at the unemployment office back when there used to, you know what I mean? And all the jobs would come through there.
Yeah.
So she saw the jobs before anybody else did. And then she like,
Until she saw one she
she
wanted.
saw FedEx. She was like, oh, that's not so bad. And she went there and never left. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Never late, never missed a day, never nothing. Never like, So I wasn't exactly like that either though. Like I didn't
Right.
pick that up.
Right. Resourceful in that way, you mean?
Just like even just baseline punctual. Like, I just wasn't that.
Right.
Because when you're like, I'm not gonna speak for us. When you're like me, and you're as self-absorbed as I can be, I just really think that. Without thinking it, I subconsciously was under the impression that so many more things revolved around me than actually did, all the way up to and including time itself.
Right.
That it was okay for me to be late to things because I had to be for whatever reason.
Right.
So,
Actually, Stevie Collars, he's a Delco cat, one of my guys.
maybe.
He and I were talking on the phone before you got here, and conversation was about, he said, just trying to learn more and more how to be a man.
Yeah.
And I said, well, there's just one word to evaluate that. And he said, what's that? And I said, responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, children don't have responsibilities and men do.
Yeah.
Adulting, whatever the hell they want to call it. But the more I can identify with being a man, the more I realize that the sacrifice of responsibility is really what makes me a man.
Yeah.
And everybody that I admired, in my younger years, right? They were all being responsible for me.
Right.
So, okay, so drop out of school, Temple. What then? What happens?
Well, I mean, I got a job. Like, I was like working nights, like UP. You're like a rap guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Biggie was like, "Don't be mad, UPS is hiring."
Yeah.
When you live as close to the real airport UPS as like my neighborhood is,
right.
like everybody does like a bit at UPS. Like
Right.
when you don't know where else to turn, you just go get a night shift at UPS.
I love that. I'm a Biggie fan too. Don't be mad. UPS is hiring.
Yeah, so that was I reached that point already. I'm 19, and I'm already like, damn, UPS that's what I'm doing here.
Right.
So I did that for a while, and then just alongside of that though, just my use of anything was changing. Like how I used things, substances, like how I behaved on them, who I did it around,
right?
Who like it just all started kind of because I wasn't going good for I once the illusion of like this is going okay for me, and I started seeing my peers, but like people that were my age kind of like lapping me in life instead of getting like a charge in me that like, oh, I got to catch up. I got to get my shit together. I got to like grow up or be a man. I went the other way, man. I was just like, this makes me
I might as well just
unhappy.
Go hard in the paint with getting on.
And I don't like feeling unhappy.
Yes, right.
So,
right.
So I just started like doing more and more and more, you know what I mean? Of whatever it was.
Right.
Lot of drinking and coking years.
Right.
Until the other stuff came along, and it was like, that was it. That's when it really changed for me. When I started doing like pills and then all the progression of that whole thing.
Right.
So honestly, when you ask like, what was that like for you? And when I look at from like 19 to 23, 24 years, I don't even know, dude. Like, I guess I had a girlfriend or two in there somewhere.
It's all a blur.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know what was when, or, you know what I mean? I just know I was like, I kept moving out of my mom's house. I kept ending up back.
Right.
And that was like embarrassing, Right. And I didn't like that. Like I would see friends out from like high school and shit, and they'd be like, oh, what are you doing these days? And I'm like, I'm probably gonna live with my mom's. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, you just bought a house sick, bro. Like, I moved out for like 3 weeks. They turned my room into like a storage locker. Now I'm sleeping on a mattress on the floor. There's like a treadmill next to my bed, Like,
well, so I mean, we're talking about, for all intents and purposes, the progression of the disease.
Yeah.
Right? So eventually we hit a point where, I mean, for most of us, where things get to a point of difficulty where it's painful.
Yeah.
Right. Where was the part where you really started to identify that, that what you were doing was causing you pain?
Yeah. I feel like I remember it was like in between like the old 30s and like the old, like the real oxys, like those days, not to get too specific, but because that's when it changed. That's
crushed and snorted plenty.
Oh yeah,
all about.
Yeah.
Right.
And I remember noticing that, like, I remember the first time I noticed I was detoxing from not taking therapy. I remember the first time I was like, man, I really don't feel good.
Yeah, right.
Like,
I figure, somebody must have gave me the flu.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's so funny that I didn't connect that with.
No, of course not.
No. I was just like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just not. I'm just feeling off, or I must be coming down with something.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that I didn't identify that this was an after effect of what I was really doing.
Right.
Right.
I also didn't really run into the problem of not having them for long stretches. Like, once I started doing them, it was probably a year before the first time I couldn't get my hands on one for a day.
Oh, yeah, and then you're in for a ride.
And then I was like, what?
Yeah, then you're in for a ride.
Yeah.
That's rough.
So there was a lot going on that supported that level of access at that time.
Right.
And then, but I remember.
You mean flippity, flip.
Yeah, we had the whole thing going, man. I mean, and we were acting wild over it too. We were watching too many fucking movies.
Yeah,
dude.
right.
We were really getting goofy,
and
so was like the other people that were doing it around us.
Right.
And
it starts to get real serious real quick, though.
It's too much money. There's so much money involved.
There's money, and then it's interfering with other people's money. So the part that you don't really see. Right. Is you get gunned up and clapped quick because somebody else is like, wait a minute, what do you mean you're not coming to me to buy X, Y, and Z now? You're going here. Right. And the next thing you know what I mean? Like, somebody's looking for you.
Right. And we're not Sosa. We were high as a kite, all of us.
Yes,
we were as unorganized as you could possibly be for a very organized
no business being in business,
operation.
Doing that business. Right. You know what
like,
I mean?
you still had to deal with real people to do
exactly.
this. It's not like all street drugs,
Right.
But I remember, like, not being able to get like perks or whatever, and at some point I would just be like, all right, I'll just like try again in the morning. I'll go try to sleep for a few hours, and I'll go try again in the morning. And then I remember, like, not too long after that, not being able to get, like, oxys and never considering stopping the effort until I got one. That was a turning point for me. Like, I remember.
No choice.
Like, I'm going to get my hands on this. Or I'm not going to stop trying until that happens. There is no take a time out for 4 hours and try to sleep.
There's a strange thing. It's like the death of the one me and the start of the other me happens like right in that point where suddenly, and it's kind of gradual, and you don't really, it's like, it's like when the human being in the vampire movies, when the human being dies off. Yeah. You know what I mean? There's somewhere in there, and you know what I mean? It's subtle, but then one day you wake up and you realize, like, the quest is on. Yeah. And
not having this is no longer an option.
Yes. Now it's necessary. Mm-hmm. Right. So, woo. Okay. Yeah. Walking up the side of the volcano here now, bro.
Yeah, there it is. That was part of it.
Right. So now, we get to the threshold of change, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, was it a series of turning points that brought you to recovery, or was it, what was the series of events that led you to the point where you said, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah. Well, like right after that realization,
Right.
like the using just continued to progress, and before you know it, I'm like all strung out on heroin. I'm like an
Right.
IV heroin user,
Right.
just like
Right.
everybody else, just
Right.
like everything I said I wasn't gonna be, just like I'm never gonna cross like this line in the sand. But
Right.
I eventually, washed out and just went further and further. And I remember the first time, like somebody like took me to rehab. I still didn't think I needed to go, but the night before, I got into a head-on collision and got hit by somebody doing like 100 miles an hour. That person happened to be an on-duty police officer and the son of the chief of police in the borough where it happened. And they arrested me on scene. It was their fault, but they arrested me on the scene, took me to the hospital. They took blood, and so now I'm done.
Right.
Because I haven't been
Yeah.
clean a day in my life
Yes.
since I'm 9 years old.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And I remember my parents being like, "You should probably get some help." And I'm like, "Yeah, I need some help. Like, let's get a lawyer. Like, make sure I don't go to jail." They were like, "No, dude. Like, you need help with the drug thing. Like, wake up.
Right.
Like,
Right.
you have a problem."
You're like, oh yeah, I need a lawyer, and all, but the using is not unmanageable. We can keep doing that.
Right,
You know what I
right,
mean?
right.
Like,
So I had to go to rehab.
right.
I went. The only reason I even went is because I'm like, that's a good place to hide. Because this just happened, and I thought they were going to come for me,
Yeah.
I mean, Dashcam kind of probably told the story what happened there, so I never heard nothing of it.
But here you are in rehab.
Here I am in rehab. And,
Now, did rehab speak to you in any way?
it did? Yeah, the first
Okay.
time it did. I went to Bowling Green,
Okay.
and it was the dead of winter. And it gets cold in Bowling Green, bro. It's on that golf course. It's cold.
Right.
And I was going through it. I'd never been sick like that in my life.
Right. Right.
From anything, And I had like my appendix taken out before, and that was better than like the dope sick I was going through,
Right. Right.
And I remember like hearing from the counselors. I definitely remember like them coming in.
Right. Right.
For both sides, and just being like, holy fucking shit, dude! Like, this is actually me. This is not a
Right.
phase.
Right.
This isn't like everything I was doing. Up
I'm
to
not
this
supposed to
point.
identify to what these people are saying here. Like, what is this? Exactly?
Right. And there was like still a lot of I nevers. I was, at that time, still was my first rehab.
Right. Right.
And
So you
then-
went back.
Oh, God, I don't even know how many times.
Yeah,
Dude.
right,
I'm the kind of I'm the person that they changed the laws about, where you
Right.
couldn't go so many times in a year. Because I would just
Right.
I'd roll up in Keystone, man. I was right down the street from where I grew up, and I'd wait in the waiting room, and they'd say, "Paul, you staying or are you going, or are you just
Right.
like waiting
Right.
for your ride to leave, and you're
Right.
gonna leave?" I'm leaving.
Right.
So, those years also blurry as far as like what it was. So like to answer your question, which I think was like, was there a one event, a series of events? I think just over time, it just wore me down, man. Like just being like, cause you just run out of like good ideas, man. Like I wasn't always flush with what I needed,
Right.
So a lot of days it was just to get standing straight up was the best I was gonna do, and that's a miserable life, man. And one of my all-time favorite movies, especially growing up, was Basketball Diaries. You see Basketball Diaries? Great movie.
I think so.
Great movie. There's a scene in Basketball Diaries where Leonardo DiCaprio's character, Jimmy Carroll, he's sick.
Right.
He's all
Right.
types of sick, and he's at his mom's apartment door. And she opens the door, and she has the chain lock on, and he's asking her for money.
I remember that.
A little bit.
Now
of
I
money.
know exactly.
Not a lot.
Yeah,
a little bit of money, and he's crying. He's got like the whole get up on,
Right.
which I also ended up wearing at times. Like he got like
Right.
the weird coat, the fingerless gloves, like the
Right.
fucking red beanie. Why we all end up with red beanies, I'll never fucking know, dude. And and he just looks like shit, man. Like shit ran over, and he's like, I just remember it so vividly. He's sliding down the wall in the hallway with his arm through the door because the chain locks on, and the mom is like absolutely having the worst moment of her life because she wants to help her son so bad,
Right.
but helping him is not giving him what he wants.
Yes. Yeah.
And realizing that was me, like being told, like from my mom,
Right.
like this, that, like that's you now. You don't even
Yeah.
realize it, but this is you.
Wow.
And because they always let me back in for whatever
Right.
reason. All the jails, all the rehabs, they would always let me back in, and I would terrorize them, dude. Over $10, like over, not like give me. They didn't have 100, so it's like, give me fucking $10, like,
Yeah.
like and I think just years of that, mixed with like, travesty, like all this like shit, how everybody dying around me, like, lots of like jail stuff. I mean, just all kinds of just just bad things happening. I didn't even know I was cleaning up when I got clean. I had no idea that's what I was doing.
Right. So you kind of arrived in a church basement after a rehab. Is that how,
Almost. I left rehab for the, I don't know, 9th or 10th, 12th, 50th, 3rd, I don't know, something time. And I got chased in there from my PO again. And, I went to a recovery house on Frankfurt and Tioga, dropped my bags in my clean urine, disappeared for a week using. And I went back for something. I guess they were going to like kick me out officially. And the dude who was running the house was in recovery. And I remember him like saying like, I can't stay here anymore, like whatever. And I'm like, all right, well, give me my money then. I got paid up. I didn't pay somebody. I don't even know who to this day. I think it was my cousin. I don't even know who paid my first 2 weeks rent at this place. This was 10 years ago. And he was like, yeah, I don't need your fucking money. Like, this ain't about money. Like, you're going to get everybody here high and half of them killed. Like, you got to go.
Right.
And I'm like, all right. And I remember he come walking from like, there was like an office, and he came back into like the big room. We call it the big, it's like such like jail, but it wasn't. The big room. And he goes in his pocket. And he starts like pulling out the money, and he's looking me like he's looking like through me, man. And he's like, I can't in good conscience give you money and let you leave the way you look.
Right.
He's like,
Because you're going to go kill yourself.
I can't do it.
Right.
It wasn't even like a lot of money. I don't even know if it was enough,
Right. Right.
He's like, so if I'm not going to do that, I gotta do something. I gotta offer you some kind of like deal,
right?
Because it's only right. So they put me on contract. I had like a 3 p. I never had a curfew in my life, dude. Right. I had a 3 p.m. curfew. I'm 30 years old with a 3 p.m. curfew. Like, what the fuck, dude? And every day, I just kind of was like, yeah, I just signed it just to have like, it's like, okay, you're not giving me the money. I need somewhere to stay. Like, all my stuff's here, and I was like, yeah, you leave at 3. I'll be out the door at 3:05.
Right.
Like, whatever, man. You know what I mean? And every day 3 o'clock would come in, and then it would be 3:05. It would be 3:10. It would be 3:15, and I would just be like, I'm gonna go now. All right, now I'm gonna get up. I'm gonna get up and go. I'm gonna like go use. Like, all right, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna piss first, and then I'm gonna go. And then that's like, so I had to go to meetings. That was like part of it.
Right.
So I went to like a couple meetings. I had to go with somebody in the house, and then I was like, I found a certain meeting downtown on 19th and Walnut during the day.
Square One, baby.
Yeah,
Smash
hell
that
yeah,
motherfucker.
dude.
Boom.
Love Square One.
I love Square One.
Vito was there.
Oh yeah, man.
Vito was there. Raj was there. Nancy still lived over here at that time.
Right.
So many people. Just the daytime crowd. They were all there, man.
I love that meeting.
And
I missed that meeting.
That was at its like peak too.
Yeah.
When we were all using
4
it,
days
leaning on it.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many lives. There's no way to quantify that, but I wonder how many lives that meeting alone saved, just by having a place to go.
So, and let's talk about that a little bit, because it's been an interesting concept that I've been exploring, and that is that, like, there's a like the power of encouragement and the ripple effect of recovery, that not just the impact that a meeting has, but the impact of all those people who go on to attend other meetings and encourage other addicts and the expansion of that. You know what I mean? Like, if we looked at any specific meeting and we quantified it as how many people actually were saved by that meeting, we would miss the ripple effect that the addicts who attend those meetings, who stay. I remember Gentleman John was my boy up in there. I love Gentleman John.
Johnny Socks, man. He was there every day.
Every day. You know what I mean? Like, and I was doing business development. So I was in a, suit and a pocket square. You know what I mean? I come down, sit in that meeting. You know what I mean? People look at me like, what's wrong? I'm like, yo, dude, like, you don't understand. Do not let the gear fool you for a minute. Like, I'm hanging onto the seat, like white knuckle for dear life.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I 100% get how that but like I said, when you consider, and I just attended World, and 79,000 meetings globally, and you realize like there were people talking about like meetings in Sweden where they were like the first meeting or the first 2 or 3 meetings, and now there's a couple hundred. And you realize that that somewhere at some point somebody had to take it elsewhere.
Yeah, that's the ripple effect. It works inversely with like the using person, like the active addict.
Ooh,
like
true.
The ripple effect of just the damage that they can spread.
Right.
It's the same thing when you flip the coin. It's the same thing for people that start to recover. It's like the hope, the joy, maybe, just maybe I could also do something like that.
Right.
Like spreads. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Misery loves company too.
Yeah.
Until it doesn't.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I went from a point where it was like, all these people around me to less and less people till, I ain't got enough for you and me, so beat it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I was alone at the end.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
I was alone at the end.
Me too.
Yeah.
So, so that was right about, so when did you arrive in the rooms right about when when you finally got to the rooms, you stayed, or did you in and out for a while and cop some,
I stayed, man.
Okay, me too.
I went to 2 meetings. I went to the, I don't know. There's a meeting under the L on Kensington Ave that everybody knows.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I went to 2 meetings there. Right. After this contract, where I was like, I'm gonna stay.
It's a crazy but good meeting. It really is crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I haven't been there in a minute.
Yeah, and
but,
God, I don't even know. I think I think the guy had to sell it or something a couple years ago. But anyway, that was back then when it was not. It was again peak, right?
Right.
Like peak.
Right.
Before Fent, before it was like that stuff was just coming into the fold.
Right.
Like we got so
boy
lucky.
Did that change the game.
We just missed that, man.
You're lucky to be here.
We just
changed
missed
the game.
Absolutely. So, I was at 2 meetings there and I didn't like it. I mean, like I'm judged, like I'm judging it or something.
Right.
And I was down at the parole building and I ran into my boy and I was telling him about my experience. I met him in rehab, and he's like, "Oh no, there's this other meeting." Tells me about Square One, and he convinces me to go.
Right.
And I was like, "All right, man. Like, I'll give it one more shot." So what's really crazy, and I forget to mention this so often, man, is like I had made a non-negotiable deal with myself that this was recovery's one shot to impress me, to wow me enough to make me want to like give it another chance.
Right.
And when I got there, it actually delivered. Like all the things I didn't get at those first 2 meetings that I was like, oh, this is all bullshit. You guys have been lying about what this is supposed to feel like for me.
Right.
When I'm also like, I'm crawling out of if I could have ripped my own legs off and beat myself to death with them, I would have,
Right.
like that's how I felt.
Right.
And, and I got there and like everything was there, man. Like, the first person to like greet me gave me my first hug, and then that meeting became my first home group. That guy became my first sponsor. Like people,
right.
It was my turn for a miracle, man. There's no other way to explain it. Like there's no other way to explain it. And nothing really crazy happened right at the end of my using to lead to like any kind of willingness. Like I can't connect any dots, man, which is why I'm so okay with just calling it a miracle. I'd rather it be that because that's cool.
Right.
You know, like how many people get like multiple miracles in a lifetime? You
No,
know?
you know what? Like your story and my story are similar in that way.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like the gift of desperation was just for me, just the spiritual death of enough.
Yeah.
Like I was just, you know, I was spiritually just, you know, they use the term bankruptcy or empty or whatever. Like you could have rung me like a bell, man.
Yeah.
I was hollow as hollow gets. And there were all kinds of other unmanageabilities that manifested themselves too. But in the end, it wasn't like I, you know, I got locked up and was forced to, you know what I mean? It was just like, you know, and I'd been going to the VA to my therapist, who at the time had 32 years clean. He was a non-vet, missing a leg. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and, you know, he never once said to me, like, you know, you should get clean. You know, I had met my, my significant other. She had been, you know, clean for a long, long time. And she never said like, hey, maybe you should. Nobody did, you know, that attraction rather than promotion piece.
Yeah.
Really, you know what I mean? Because nobody really said to me like, oh, you should probably. And I remember how shocked he was. Because I'd been seeing my therapist for about a year or 18 months. And one day I went in there and I was like, I slapped a white key tag down on the table. And he was like, whoa. Yeah. You just tell, you know what I mean? Like he was just shocked about the fact that, you know, that I had been brought to the point where it was, and, you know, and I, you know, for what it's worth, I mean, I glued myself to the seat, you know what I mean? Like once I was, and I, boy, want to use, man. Oh my God.
Oh God.
Oh my God.
In the beginning.
No, I used to cry in the shower. I used to tell people that, like, you know, later on I tell people like it was like tears in the rain. You know what I mean? It was like that machismo shit. Like if I cried in the shower, then it
didn't
count.
Right.
And then one day, strangely enough, because I would ask people, I'd be like, when is this shit gonna, when am I going to want to stop? And then one day I was in the shower and I was like, I'm not crying. Wait a minute. I didn't think about using for a minute. And I realized that it didn't even tell me it was on its way. You losing the desire didn't even mention I'm on my way out, right? Like, yo, cuz, here, I'm leaving.
You don't get warning.
There was no warning. It just slipped out quietly like a thief in the night. Didn't say a word.
Yeah.
And, you know, trying to encourage people that, okay, so I got a Grand National, right? You know, and the guy who works on my Grand National, you know, lives in Sea King. And I remember taking it to him because I needed to have work done. And I was like, and of course, I'm trying to figure out budget. You know what I'm saying? Like, what, you know what I mean? I want to do this. But how long? And one day I was like, you know, what's this going to cost? And he said, it takes what it takes.
Yeah.
And losing the desire to use, it takes what it takes.
It takes what it takes, man.
You know what I mean? Like it's funny that somehow I connected that somewhere along the line, but I just realized, because you see people just tortured with just, I want to get high so bad. And just like, you know, that's why it's so powerful just to keep coming back piece.
Yeah.
You know, make it to midnight. Don't use no matter what and keep coming back because, you know, so many people we bury because they leave 5 minutes before the miracle happens.
Yeah, a guy sponsored me for a lot of years. In the beginning, would always say, "You don't know when that happens. You just know when you realized it happened."
Ooh.
But people say, "I remember losing a desire to use." He'd be like, "No, you don't.
Right.
You just remember when you realized you had lost it."
Boy, is that accurate.
So that's a
100%.
twofold. That's a 2-act play.
Right.
Like which you're not there for the first act. Like you don't know when that happened. You remember the moment of like the awakening of like, oh my God, that's gone now.
Right.
And just realizing learning that about yourself. Fortunately for me, it was early. It was like my first couple of days because I was on the streets. I'd already picked up a whole habit again.
Right.
You know, since I left rehab, and in those like little couple days, so I detoxed in the rooms. Like I did that.
Okay.
I mean, it was spring, so it was not the worst case scenario. You know, could have been like December or something, but you know, it was like nice out, and I was like not with all that nice weather just yet. It was like, oh, it's so nice out. I'm like, not for me, man.
Yeah, let me pull my hoodie down a little bit
not
further.
For me,
right.
but yeah, once that a couple things, man. Like after that first, I would say week of me
Right.
of me giving it its one more shot, which is
Right.
just so preposterous to even
Right.
say out loud. I feel embarrassed to say that now, knowing
Right.
what that shot has given me.
Right. Right.
But that's my truth, man. It's like I went there so ignorant to what was available to me, available to us all.
Right.
Correction.
Right.
And I just like the audacity of me, because there's so many
We're
other
all
people.
audacious at that stage, though, aren't we? Though, like I was just
Yeah.
kind of like, yeah, I got my shit together. It was a dumpster fire to
Yeah.
the 50th level, but so that leads me to some other things. So because you and I, we have influence over others, and we have influence, or at least attempt to have influence over others. And I know at least specifically one individual that I've been trying to encourage him to the process of the 12 steps, and to some resistance, right?
Yeah.
And and we say we stop using, which feels impossible until we do it.
Right.
And then losing the desire to use that we quantify slips out like a thief in the night. You don't even know it's leaving.
It's almost like somebody steals it from you.
Yes. Yeah, it's weird. It just kind of one day I was just like, hey. Now, it doesn't mean that it didn't come back from time to time, or it didn't like,
Right.
I tell people all the time, it was like the first Jurassic Park. Remember they're standing in the paddock, and the Australian guy with his hat flipped up like Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah.
And the velociraptors run screaming, and they hit the electric fences. And he says, one of the guys on the thing says, well, if they know it's electrified, why do they keep hitting the fences? He said, they keep hitting it in different places. They're looking for a weak spot. And then he said, they're learning.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, woo, my hair stand up on my arms. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the disease continues to try and periodically double back, and either making things look more appealing than they actually really. It's amazing how much the disease has fucking selective amnesia. How quickly the gift of desperation that led me to want to change slides away, and my life becomes even slightly manageable, even if it's still a fucking dumpster fire. But then suddenly it's like, oh, well, maybe you could, or, maybe that looks. So you said you had a sponsor, your first sponsor. So did you embark in the step process right away?
I did.
Or
Right away.
Right
away. Because I've always, whatever I was doing in life, even using, like whether it was a job or like just whatever I was in, I always wanted to be like good at it. I didn't want to be middle of the pack at anything.
Right.
So whether it was like a job or an activity or a sport or just whatever it was, I wanted people to be impressed with me.
Me too.
I wanted to be good at it. And I mean, you're a sharp guy, right? I feel like we share this. You're like a pretty intelligent guy.
You hit it. Like, right. I go to meetings and people would talk, and here we go. Like, I'm not sure if this is get cut out or not, but fuck it. I go to meetings and feel like the guy with the small junk at the gangbang. Like, people would start talking about, the step process. And I'd be like, I didn't want to be the guy at the meeting that didn't know what they were talking about or couldn't, so it was, and Al, so Al and I sat at the, what's the name of that little diner? Right on one. He met me and said, we sat down and he was like, because I asked him to sponsor me. My first sponsor was, I think, using why he was sponsoring me. And then he went out, right? So, and I was tortured. And, my better half knew a lot of people. So I would come back to her from day to day and be like, how about, and I would just rattle off some names, and she would be like, and then one day I was like, well, how about Al? And she was like, like she knew him well.
Right.
And one day I was like, so I just blurted out, I just got up enough courage to ask him. And he told me to meet him at the diner, and we went and we had eggs. And he said, listen, he said, first thing is, I got two kinds of sponsees. I got the kind of sponsees I work the steps with, and I got the kind of sponsees I work the steps with and we become friends. He said, obviously I prefer the latter, but it's not essential. He said, and the second part is, if you're serious about your recovery, I'll see you in 30 days with your written step one.
Yeah.
When we finished breakfast, he got up, he paid for my meal, and he walked out. And the concept that I wouldn't be serious about my recovery, oh man, I was like, challenge. I got after it, bro. I was like, okay. And I mean, it might not have been 30 days. It might have been plus 1 or 2, but I was ready for him with a written step 1. And I still, it's funny how, you know, they say that, you know, and I tell people all the time, like, listen, I sponsor the way I was sponsored. So I say those exact same things plus or minus to other people. Yeah. Right. And thank God. Yeah. Thank God. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you know, if, and the funny thing was, so I haven't told this story in a while either. So it was my first year. I'd completing the writing portion in the review of 3 steps, right? My home group was school in Edmonds. Okay. So I was coming up on, like, the day before my 1-year anniversary, a guy that I got on with a lot in South Philly reached out to me, and he was like, yo, cuz. He was like, don't get your hopes up or whatever. He said, but, you know, maybe I can come to one of them meetings with you. And I was like, all right. Well, his brother and I were real close. And his brother died of brain cancer a couple years prior, and he was all ready. And, you know, we just buried him 2 years ago on Thanksgiving Day. He died. And, but he called me and he was like, listen, can we meet up? And I was like, all right, well, so he brought his nephew with him, I was close with him and his brother. So he brought his nephew with him and brought him to the meeting. And I didn't tell him I was speaking for my 1 year. So the two of them walked in. And I walked over and I gave them both a basic text I bought out of the box and sat them in the seats, right, 1 and 2, right in front of me. And then I went around and sat at the table and shared for 1 year. And the next day he called me and he said, yo, man, would you sponsor me? And I called out and I was like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, can I? And he was like, listen, I don't see anywhere in the literature it says the therapeutic value of one addict helping another unless y'all have a history together and you all use together or whatever. He said, if you don't think it's going to get in the way, by all means, tell him yes. Well, he immediately got after writing big time. And the ego that led me from 1 to 3 now pushed me, because I was like, I'll be damned if he was going to get to the point where I was, and I was no longer going to be able to guide him because I didn't have familiarity with what was next. So once he got on, like, really answering questions, you want to review with me, I got on too. You know what I mean? Like, the step process, I launched into the step process because of ego, and then the step process helped me with ego. Right? You know what I mean? Like, so the fact that we share, like, some of that in our journey is really compelling to me, because I'm like, yeah, me too, man. Like, I was like, I didn't want to be the guy that couldn't contribute or didn't know what everybody was talking about. And then the funny thing was, it planted other things in my life, basically, you know, character defects that, you know, that showed up in the 6th step, but I didn't know that at the time until I was already there. And then it started. But, you know, I'm so glad to hear somebody else, because other people are like, you know, because my sponsor told me to, or because, and I was just kind of like, nah, you know what I mean? Like, it was really because I, you know, I wanted to be able to be like the man. Yes. Right? You know what I mean? And
wanted to be good at.
Yeah, I want to be good at this. Right, exactly. You know what I mean? And the reason why I thought it was, one of the reasons why I thought it would be really cool to get in here with you was because in the beginning, and you and I sounded very similar. That was the thing that shocked me when you came in and spoke that day, because it sounded an awful lot like me, and it was a little, in a strange way, maybe a little discomforting, because I thought I was the only cat. Yeah. Because I treated it like you could know this thing, like you could know a lot, right? Yeah. And so, you know, and I wanted to, like you said, impress. So eventually it got to the point where, let me break down what the literature says and let me explain to you. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? I turned into kind of like an early professor of recovery. Like, I wanted to, like, And then slowly over time, I watched some people who were professors of recovery go get on. I had a sponsee who went back out and then asked me to sponsor him. And he had 37 years before he went out. And he was one of the top addiction counselors in the East Coast.
Jeez.
He was our sponsors, as he put it, arch nemesis. And he asked, and I think in a strange way, like he asked me to sponsor him because in a way he thought he could probably control the situation more because, you know what I mean? Because he, even though he had gone out and come back, he had so much of a history in the program and the process and, you know, and all these other things. And then I was like, well, listen, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't have any other background about how to sponsor somebody except the way I was. So I'd be like, listen, man, so we write. And he'd be like, bah, do we really have to write? And all this. And I remember talking to, and I didn't have the confidence level to be able to say to him what needed to be said. Like I would go to Al one point. I was like, yo, he doesn't want to write. And Al said, ask him how that worked out for him last time. And I was like, I'm not necessarily, you could say that to him. I'm not necessarily sure I can.
Right.
And, you know, and it eventually came to a head one day. You know, we went and sat in a diner and I, you know, basically, and I'm not necessarily sure I was unkind, but I certainly had uncomfortably taken a stance about, like, you know, what this thing had to look like. And, you know, and there was some resistance and then the relationship kind of ended.
Yeah.
Like, and, you know, so, you know, I'm still back to, you know, the funny thing is what's changed for me is that I went from, I'm going to guide somebody through this process to, you know, here's the book, right? Read this, answer these questions. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? And realizing that the beautiful thing about this process is that so many have invested so much time in building a system around these things. And frankly, if it wasn't for that, I'd be extremely limited to how many people I could guide.
Right.
You know what I mean? A series of questions built into a flat book and a basic text or whatever. Those things together combined give me the ability to be able to help many.
Yes.
Because instead of carrying the addict, I really get to carry the message. And they can all be in various stages of wanting to or not wanting to participate, and that's fine. But without those tools, I'd have one guy.
Right.
There'd be no way. You know what
That's
I mean?
all you can handle.
Yeah, there'd be no way. And instead, you know what I mean? I keep a running chart of who's on what and who's doing what and dates and that type of thing, so I can kind of periodically. But I tell people all the time, yo, I ain't the Tony Robbins of the program. You know what I mean? Like, I got enough difficulty just trying to, you know, motivate myself. So if you're looking for somebody to quote unquote hold you accountable, maybe I'm not your guy. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
maybe I'm not
I know
your
exactly
guy.
what you mean.
You know?
Yeah.
Al would say sometimes you got to pull your sponsee's foot out of their ass and put your foot up in there.
Yeah.
And that I've gotten better at that over time, but that's still like, that's not my strong suit. You know what I mean? Like, I'm more like a subtle cat or whatever. But I also realize that, you know, you know, if you want what we have to offer and you're willing to make the effort to get it.
Yeah. I mean, I had a sponsor for like a couple months in the beginning. But when I say my first sponsor, I mean Jay, the guy that I rocked with for like 4 or 5 years.
Right.
In my real beginning, that I went through like most of the steps with, and similar approach, but he was like a North Philly trash man. You know what I mean? So he would say stuff like, "How free do you want to be? Don't answer that.
Right.
You're going to show me. I don't need you to answer that." And that would be it. That would be the end of our discussion. How free do you want to be? Don't tell me. You're going to end up showing me whether you like it or not.
Don't listen to what people say. Watch what they do.
Yeah, and he would just, and that was, I say it, and that's how I do it still. How free do you want to be?
Right.
Like, that's the thing. Like, I'm going to remain as free whether you complete XYZ task or not.
Right.
And that's the hard truth. You know, that's like but that's the reality, man. It's like, I am also a person walking this path, like living this life.
Right.
You know, so if you see me out in one of those basements, it doesn't mean that I am there to manage whatever crisis you have that day. I'm also there for my own dilemmas. Like, I'm also there because my friends are here. I'm not saying I won't, but I'm just saying it's like, you know, that's not the path. You know,
Right.
is you run down on me on a Wednesday night and you corner me. It's like, and my guys, they know they don't do that. You know what I mean? But like I've had in the past where I had to like kind of tell people like, hey, listen, kind of like I said with my parents in the beginning, is like, I know for you, because I thought the same way about my guy. I didn't consider that he had like a family and a career and all these other things to do. Like once I asked him to do a job for me, I thought that all other things in his life stopped, and that's what he was there for.
Right.
So, you know, you just have to explain that, because we all have that capacity to be that self-absorbed, to where we really think like a lot more things revolve around us than what actually do, you know?
The self-centeredness at the core of our disease.
Oh, God, it's crazy, man. I mean, still to this day. You were saying something a minute ago. It just really made me think about like the disease and the evolution. And, you know, we both have had a similar experience and trajectory since we've surrendered, you know?
Finding a new way to live. Right?
Yeah, man. We, you know, it's been good. It's been good to me.
I've been watching.
Yeah. So and I know
that's the really cool thing about. So, and I want to be careful about the way I say this, right? Because you know we have one promise and many gifts, right? But there's simply no way to live by the spiritual principles in all your affairs and not be showered with gifts. It doesn't mean that the shit won't hit the fan, and it does. And it doesn't mean that it was Bobby Bad Arms talks about one time. You know, one time he made me read Rumi. He was like, you know, sometime the storm comes in and sweeps your house empty, and you got to embrace that just as much as you. And I was like, wow, like some old ass, you know what I mean, like wisdom up in that, the Guest House by Rumi, it's called. So you know what I mean, like, but I look at the results of recovery evidence themselves in the new way lived, right? And I mean, I know an addict, you know what I mean, like that I'm very fond of, and he helped me tremendously. But I remember, you know what I mean, like you walk around with a length of key tags like this that he hang from his belt, right? And he would like corner me, and he had no teeth in his mouth, and he'd be like, "No man, can I get $10?" And you know what I mean, I'll get money back in a week. Well, after half a dozen times that we did this, let me get a 20. Can I get? And I realized that really, like, yes, he had lost the desire to use, and he had stopped using. And I just felt that was sad. And not to say that everybody has to ascend the plateau, and I certainly have not. I still have a long ways to go for where I want to go. But the point of the matter was, I wanted to be like people that were really, and that was the thing about Al. Al had, like he was living the way I wanted to live. You know what I mean? Like he had some things going on. And even though he had already kind of quasi-retired or whatever, I was like, I don't want to live like, I didn't want to Johnny Punch clock it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and, I'd already built a business and crashed it into the ground and, smoked it and, et cetera, et cetera, started from scratch again. You know what I mean? And I was like, and I wanted people that, that the evidence of finding a new way to live was evident in the way they were living, right? And it's one of the reasons why, I thought you were good to come in here, because I've watched you and, your better half is a dynamic duo, right? So, both in, real estate, her in real estate and you in real estate financing.
Yeah.
Right. So on one side, her, watching her go through the challenges and the vicissitudes of trying to navigate her way through trying to sell somebody some real estate, and then at the same time helping other addicts, because that's the really cool thing I've noticed. I know a lot of women in recovery who are, agents, right? You know what I mean? Like, because, and some of them transitioned into brokers, et cetera, and because we help ourselves, and then we go on. I can't tell you how many times I see people like standing on the front steps of their house, and they're like, "Look at this new house," and the persons that they're standing with are also people, that are like us.
It's a very cool part of it. It's
fucking
a huge perk,
right? And for me, with a 511 credit score when I got the NA, oh, that'll get cut. With a 511 credit score when I got the recovery, right? having to rebuild all of that. Like, dude, my credit was so bad I had to wait for my cash to clear. Like,
dude.
I beat every loan for any. You know what I mean? Like, I beat every bag. I beat every, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I beat it all, right?
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? So, it was the necessity to become responsible gave me a life worth living, right? And I see you today living a pretty fruitful life, like more than pretty fruitful. You know what I mean? The neat thing about social media and stuff like that is we get a visual representation for what it's worth of what other people are doing. And I'm a big fan. So I watch what you and the better half are doing. I see your daughter, how old is she?
So Cabes is going to be 8 at the end of the month.
God bless, man.
Yeah. And she, apparently she's like, all of a sudden she's like the best cheerleader in the world. She's like all this like crazy cheerleading. Like her Pop Warner team qualified for nationals, going to Florida for nationals. It's a big deal. I mean, it's like a once in a lifetime opportunity. Are they going to win? But they're like, they could, you never know, right? It's like a game 7, like anything could happen. It's like, it's like a judged competition. Right. So if the old Russian judge drops the hammer on some of the other squads, like, who knows, dude?
Right.
So that's cool for her. I'm excited for her. She's in this like other all-star thing at like apparently one of the like highest rated all-star cheer gyms like in the area, whatever. And more important than any of that, she loves it. Right. So like the schlep to and fro
now,
is a lot easier.
Before we get, so I remember at some point, I'm not sure if this is correct or not. It seemed like at some point she was being more deeply integrated into your lives.
Yeah.
Was it so was she your product or hers, because you and your half haven't been together as long as I don't, or were you? Like,
almost. Yeah. So we've been together 8.5 years, married 6.
Okay.
Celebrated 6 years married in October.
Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, to us, both of us equally, that is as big of a congratulations as like the other milestones these days, because we know how hard it is, and we're open about it too. Like I feel like she does a great job of that. I do a great job of that without like saying it's hard. I'm never saying it's hard to be married to you.
Right.
I'm just saying it's hard to be married as me.
My wife right now, she's watching this episode, is going, yeah, I get that.
And that's important to be able to say that. And we have that kind of relationship. Our relationship is built. That's one of the keystones of our relationship, is being able to like just talk about those kind of things. Like,
do you find you guys complement each other because of the real estate and the real estate financing? Are you like 1-2 punching a lot of it?
I mean, I do mortgages. She does real estate. The only reason I didn't become a realtor is because I would have.
She was already doing that.
Yeah, it's the same sphere. It's
you weren't going to be competition for each other, right?
Yeah. And it's a lot better than like painting like in power plants and shit like I was doing out in the elements.
Right.
So with the kid, no, she's actually neither of ours.
Okay.
So
wow, okay.
Yeah, she is my wife's brother's biological daughter.
Oh, okay.
So on her side, it's her, and then she has a brother, and then she has a younger sister. There's 3 of them.
Okay.
So he is one of us, just not like us just yet.
Mm-hmm.
And her mother, his wife, technically, is also one of us. Same, not like us. Yeah,
right. Right.
So,
and that was the part where I kind of. There was a point where it was like.
It was like a
here's Cabes, right?
Yeah.
And I saw your better half trying to navigate her way through, trying to figure out that relationship, like you could tell, like she was trying to soft shoe it. She wanted to be a really good example, but it clearly seemed almost like new, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I was kind of like, I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, like, like how did this? It's a wonderful, dude. You want to talk about banging story? Like,
yeah, I love the story, and I'm never like, and so the cool thing is Cabes already knows,
right?
We've never.
Do you have any interface with her father or mother about? How did that go down? Did they like?
Yeah.
Did they? give up the ability for you to be there, or
the state stepped in.
Okay.
The state stepped in, and so she was living somewhere where a newborn shouldn't live. She was crawling around on rugs that babies shouldn't be crawling. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the state stepped in because there was already a history there,
right,
of other children having to be stepped in for,
right,
on there between those two and beyond, right? So, I mean, I don't want to say nothing bad about them because I didn't have kids when I was using, so I don't know.
Right.
Don't know what I'd have been capable of.
Right.
Got an idea. I know.
Sure.
So, it's not like I don't think anything like that it's like their fault. I don't really look at it like that, So state stepped in. Next, they reach out to your next of kin. That's their move, right? It's Delaware County, like DHS or whatever. So they reach out like right away to the grandparents first, and then they go siblings.
Right.
Well, the grandparents, so the mom's grandparents already have one of the grandkids.
Okay.
That they're raising, so they can't.
They had enough.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the dad, it was my wife's brother's grandparents, already had a kid that they were raising from them, one of the grandkids. So then it came to us. And when they came to us, they were like, "You're a good fit," and we were like, "Yeah, okay,
wow.
yeah." We were like, "I guess." I mean, we kind of wait to like do all that, like just started like making money, we're just like, we had our little 2-bedroom row home in Germantown. It was just us, like we were living the dream, man. Like
compared to where you'd come from,
it was good. Like we were just kind of starting to like learn how to live together and like new dating. Like we were like broke, but it was like a lot of fun. Everything a new relationship should experience.
And then suddenly going through reality of responsibility at a level that is totally like several tiers above.
Yeah. Right. We weren't even married yet. We weren't even engaged. We were just like, so they come, they reach out, we talk about it, and we say, she of course like wants to do it like more than I do, which I have no problem admitting. And I was like, yeah, okay. I guess seems like the right thing to do.
It's a commitment that you can't really go back on once you're there.
Yeah.
Unless you really want to feel like a crumb bum.
I knew there was no going back.
Yeah, right. So, you know what I mean? Like, so having some hesitation or reservations about that, I think would be natural for anybody, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And, and this is part of like, we talk about this, the volcano story, right? And how far up to the edge we get, you know what I mean? Like like for me, luckily enough, like I got into the heat and, I got kind of close to the top, but I didn't I didn't put on the shiny metal suit and, with the ladle and go start pull. You know what I mean? Like thankfully I got to the edge of, this is just no longer, not what I want to do anymore. But, so everybody's volcano story is different. And frankly, I like yours a lot. And the reason why I like it more is because, and you'll relate to this. Normal people compare tops, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? My shit is even better. Addicts compare bottoms, right? You know what I mean? Like I was in jail. I was a gutter snipe. You know what I mean? And the levels just go deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's really about who like swam around in the fucking, in the volcano. And I've always felt like the challenge with that really rests in the fact that for many of us, that's not necessarily relatable. And I know early on in my recovery, there was a part of me that felt like, do I really fucking belong here? Because, when we compare, the gift of desperation, my shit was ugly and your shit is, downright fucking on fire to a level that, and so, and the other thing too is, the necessity for authenticity that brings that to the table.
Yeah.
Right. Because I know over time, at least for me, calibrating, the gift of desperation, it actually brought me here. Like, I was never disingenuous about it, but there was a point where I just realized that it was okay for it to be where it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my bottom was my fucking bottom. And, and thank God I got there and didn't have to go out for another fucking 10 or 20 years until, I was doing double life. And dude, I'm telling you, like, some of the stuff, you know what I mean? Like, some of the decisions that I made clearly could have burned my life down and the life of I dated a girl who, who's doing life right now.
Mm.
Like, you know what I mean? She smacked a girl in the head with a vodka bottle. They were, she was doing her coke and smoking wet, and they got in an argument at her house in Skipback, and she smacked her in the head with a vodka bottle. And then, while the girl was laying on the floor, she dumped a bottle of Q-Tex on her and lit the house on fire and walked out and let the house burn down, burned her to death. Right? You know what I mean?
Shit.
Like, you go, dude, I brought that girl to my Christmas party at my business. You know what I mean? 6 months.
And that's just one story.
That's just one. That's just
singular
one. And I could go on and on about the girl who stole my piece and shot a hole through my kitchen, my bathroom sink.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, I was like, what was that sound? And she come down and handed me my 380, and I was like, and I was like, let me take you back to where I found you. And I drop her off, and I go home, and I'm like, and I'm all stuck on stupid, and I'm upstairs, and I'm like, I use the bathroom or whatever, and I turn the sink on the next day. I forget when the fuck it was, and it's pissing water on my fucking foot. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I get down and look, and there's a hole through the bottom of my fucking sink. She stole my piece right out of my car when I picked her up, shot a hole in was playing with my piece. She could have easily shot herself in the fucking head playing around with my shit, right? You know what I mean? Like, all the times that and sometimes I want to make light of the gift of desperation or the volcano, although clearly I got close and further away over time, but it wasn't like that. I was close to the edge about thinking about killing myself. Mm-hmm. But, circumstances and situations hadn't gotten to the point where, like, I heard other people have stories that were like, that were even uglier. And then at some point I was like, well, do I, am I enough of an addict to really be here with these people?
Well,
you know what I mean?
I think sometimes you got to stay clean for a little while to realize that.
Fucking right.
And it's like, and I love the duality of the meaning of this is, yes, there's the obvious, like, dancing on the volcano, the potential for this, like, eruption of, like, a ton of bad shit. Like, are you going to, like, perish by these risks you're taking, this life you're living, this, like, obvious path of destruction and just all around badness, you know, and you're like dancing on the edge, which is more dangerous than just standing on the edge or something like that. And then there is like the other implication of like the recovery version of it, where dancing to me has always implied some level of joy and freedom. So it's like, even like clean me, to use the visual metaphor of dancing on a volcano, is like, I am having a fucking ball. I'm having the best time dancing on top of this thing that really has the potential to erupt on me and wipe me out at any given time if I'm not careful. You know what I mean? So to finish the story about that was one of those volcano moments, because we didn't get her then. We got denied.
Oh,
imagine saying you're going to do that. Imagine convincing yourself that, okay, I'm going to give up all of my newfound freedom because my disease, that's what you're saying. It's like, you just got a big raise and there it goes. I just got in the union. I got benefit. I got all this shit. And, and then we go and they're like, oh, sorry. Based off of your background and all these other things.
Crushing.
Like, she's going to go into the system. She's going to go into foster care.
So what did you do then? I mean, did you put the gloves on and go after it, or?
Nah, we just said God's will. We just really kind of chalked it up. But it made us aware of things that were going to hold us up in many of areas of our life. Okay.
Well, you mean like other?
Like I was still on parole.
Right.
They didn't like that. Right. You know what I mean? I had a fucking interlock. I just got my driver's license back,
right,
and I had
right.
those. I had one of those in my truck. You know what I mean? I used
they
to
were
take
like,
it to the
yeah, you would be a good fit.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
And she
Well, how
had
much
some
of a
stuff.
time was there between the time when they denied you and then when they told you that did
So-
you have to go back and reapply, or
No,
did they come
came to us?
Oh,
they
that's
came to us
fantastic.
and said, her case is going to be terminated. We can't reach the mother. The father's in jail, and she's going to be terminated, and she's going to be permanent foster care. And we just wanted to let you know. And we were like, hey, is there any way we could like revisit our application or make a
Right.
new one or like
Right.
whatever? We went to all these classes. I mean, what we did it took everything out of us, like months of doing things just to be told to prepare for this. Like buying a crib was one of the things, changing our house around, like all these
You
things.
mean before you got denied?
Before, yeah, because we never considered it. We never considered. They asked us, we never considered that there was like a denial possibility. So they reached out to us, said we're going to terminate it. We said, hey, can we revisit it, blah, blah, blah. And we're going down to court that day. And the day we got the call, we were on our way to sign papers to buy the house we were living in off of our landlord. In like a up and coming neighborhood in like Germantown,
Right.
And she just got into real estate. I was like doing okay, and we were going to we get the call, and we go and we meet him, and we're like, hey, we got to hit pause on this because we might actually be getting like a kid instead. Like trying to explain that to like a regular,
Right.
like basically he's like, what do you mean? Nice guy named Ken. And I was like, Ken, basically a fucking stork is going to come drop off a full-grown baby on my
Right.
doorstep, like on Friday, maybe.
Right.
And we had to go down to court. We had to like present our case again. We had to do it, but we had cleaned all that stuff up. Just because
Plus, you'd already gone through the classes, and you'd already gone through
all that stuff was done.
Wow.
Not for that reason, though. Like the classes, yeah, but like the warrants out of state and all that, like going to somebody.
Finding a new way to live is clearing up all the wreckage of our past, and that takes fucking time.
One of us had to go down south, spend the night in jail. To clean something up.
Yeah,
you know what I
right,
mean?
right.
So there was like a lot of stuff that had to get going on and so we did it anyway because it was going to affect me in my career at some point. It was going to affect her.
Is that one of the reasons you chose a career change too? Was because
Nah,
no,
that was just I wanted freedom in other ways.
Yeah,
So
right.
we ended up getting her.
right?
And that was, becoming a parent to a 2-year-old when you
Whole different.
have
You're not ramped up for it. Yeah,
zero.
yeah.
Not to mention, we had just rescued a pit bull from Front and Hunting Park about 2 months before that. That was 2 years old, 70-pound, just meat missile that didn't have any recall or like any manners.
You're like, oh, meat missile, meat.
Yeah,
2-year-old baby.
Bruno.
Right,
we
right,
still have
right.
both of them, thank God.
Right.
They have all their fingers and toes. You know what I mean? Everybody's cool. But and then we had to move right away. Like, from that point on, my life was always kind of changing since I've been like getting
Yeah, but
clean.
that's like accelerated path shit right there, like a motherfucker.
Brother, man. It just set in motion such a domino effect of so many different things. She's going to be 8 now. That was like almost 6 years ago.
Like I said, I remember like those first posts where I can't remember so much posts from you, but I remember your better half being like,
I wasn't on Facebook then.
right? And
I didn't have to be.
she was like, okay, here's how I'm doing, and you could tell it was like clearly, the baby wasn't newborn baby, right? And she was trying to get her head around, I'm trying to do this the right way. And there was something there where I was just trying to go like, there's something behind this. There's some other thing. And that's what I mean about multiple levels of gift of desperation.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, like having to and what I said before about the conversation I had before you got here, right? You know what I mean? Like being responsible teaches you how to be a parent, teaches you how to be a man, right? And clearly, you upgraded your man card several levels.
Had to.
By doing what you did.
Reluctantly, I might add.
And still doing it to this day. But you hit it up 100%. Like, that's what it is to fucking dance. Right? You know what I mean? Is, there's a quote from quote from an Indian chief named Tecumseh. And he talks about, protect and beautify your life. He said, live your life like you're going over the Great Divide. And go over like a hero going home. And, I think, matter of fact, I said that just before you got here to that same guy. I said, perfect and beautify your life, right? And that's what the dance is really all about, bro.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to get you in here, right?
Yeah.
Because the example, like, frankly, there are plenty of examples of recovery, right? You know what I mean? And stopping using was one of the first examples that I targeted, right? I was like, okay, that motherfucker there not using, I can motherfucker not use too, okay, right? But sooner or later, it was, what I wanted was that people that were obviously perfecting and beautifying their life in some way. And then early on, that was like people that could laugh.
Yeah.
People, because I had lost all humor, and I just, you know what I mean? Like, I was devoid of anything that was really joy or enjoyment. A lot of that had been soaked up in the desperation and the hollowness and all that other stuff. But, the reason why I think that what we do is so important is because for people to understand what's possible. And that doesn't necessarily mean we all got to be fucking Elon Musk and shit. Like, that's not right.
Yeah.
But the fact that, you can build a wonderful, fruitful life, and it can be a combination of, some shit that you went hard in the paint for, and also some shit that came to you unexpectedly, and then you utilize the tools, the step process, a fellowship of other people could stand together with us in the storm. Because I know a lot of shit I went through. And I call Al and be like, what am I going to do, Al? And Al would be like, take a deep chill.
Yeah.
Think about this. Think about that. I would say this and say that. 6 minutes. Warheads on foreheads, baby. Like, he don't spend a lot of time sometimes on the phone. He just get right to the meat of it and click, click. You know what I mean? But it was like, without that, I would have shit canned my life a dozen times, over the last, 8 or 9 years, 9.5, however long it's been since he sponsored me, but it's been a long time. But, what's possible is what's attractive. And the reason why I thought this was so important was a couple. One is, and I mentioned this to you when we were in the office before we got started, legacy, right? None of us have a fucking digital readout on our forehead that tells other people or tells us how much time we've got fucking left. And these recordings are a way for other people later on, sometimes maybe even after we're gone, to come back and get a deeper version of the story about our history, a way to see us in a vulnerable and real state, right? Like, you talked about it, like, oh, I had to get on social media, right? You know what I mean? Like, when we're in business, right? When we're out there trying to navigate our way through the world and be successful in some capacity, it requires us to build. We don't sit behind masks, but we have to build an avatar, right? For other people to interface with us, because they must like us, they must trust us, they must feel comfortable with us and all those things. But at the same time also, what that at least in part lacks is the vulnerability associated with who we really are.
Right.
And I think some of that gets lost in the sauce. And what's really been difficult for me to navigate my way through, especially doing this, because we haven't been doing this very long, my bro, is that I can't do both things at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, I must maintain an avatar of who I am, right? So that I am acceptable to the world at large, to do business and navigate my way through profitability and all those other things, to be a leader, a servant leader, to be accepted in what I do. But at the same time, I have a fucking responsibility. And that responsibility is to carry the message. And part of what gets missed in a church basement, right, is the process of perfection and beautification of the lives we live today.
You can't do both in either spot.
No. So it's
this is the bridge.
This is the bridge. But that's exactly it. And and that was the concept behind dancing on a volcano. I was like, well, okay, like there's no way to do this. Like I was never really a person. I could only live my recovery out loud to a point. But I'm starting to really realize that I had a conversation yesterday with somebody who I'm part of a council for a periodical that I won't mention here, but big, I get an opportunity to contribute content for a major news publication, big. And the interview process yesterday, like now we're talking about articles I'm writing, and I mean it's a big thing, and I mentioned that yesterday in the process. I've started to mention that not only do I do this or do I run these companies, but I also do dancing on a volcano. And she said, "Oh, I saw that about you, and I'm in recovery too."
Nice. Yeah.
And I was like, I got to chill. I was like, wow. You know what I mean? You really realize that so many of us are hidden behind these avatars of so many more than maybe even people are out there doing business with people, having trust in people that they don't even really realize have this past, that's actually even more of a fucking miracle.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? And how do we bridge that gap in some way where people can see that you can have a past? And frankly, like if you don't want to do fucking business with me because of my past history, there's enough people that still do, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But I have a responsibility to share the story of others, right? And to dance on the volcano with them because hope is hearing other people's experiences.
Yeah, I've been fortunate where I never really was in a position where I had to hide it, that I was in recovery. And coming from where I come from, the places, the people, the neighborhood, the upbringing, like whatever, man.
Right.
Like, I mean, when my family actually cut me off, they were like, not only are we going to call the cops if we see you on the street, all the neighbors were told to call the cops. We see. So it was like, when I got clean, it was like there was no way to like not disclose like what had been going on. You know, like everybody knew about me.
But for people that don't know you yet. Right.
Yeah.
Like they're not necessarily privy to your past.
No,
history.
for sure. But if it comes up, I've always been in the extremely fortunate position. And I'm so grateful for that I don't have to. And I have plenty of my friends have careers where it behooves them that they don't talk about it. They can't talk about it because they can't have those careers if they talk about it. Right. I've never had those handcuffs put on me. And even more so, like, when I was like a union construction worker, like, bro, you're either using or you're a recovery. You're probably not even down the middle. So, but then when I branched out and I got into the mortgage thing and now I'm like on my own, it's like that was a part of the consideration is if I'm going to leave this life, work life, for another work life, like I need to be able to just be who I am. I want to go somewhere where I can actually be more of who I am. Right. Because I'm not ever going to be anybody else, man. You know what I mean? So,
well, this has been specifically what we're doing has been the transcendence from the choice of transparency and transparency with no choice. Right. Right. Like that's where that's been the bridging gap between, right? So, anonymity, right? You know what I mean? And, this is a situation now where, I quoted this once before a couple episodes ago. Like there was the Game of Thrones shit that was really big at one point. The little guy said one time he was like, once once everybody knows your secret, it no longer can be used against you.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, oh, how to get a T-shirt made of that shit, man.
Yeah.
That's fucking banging. But I really felt like, these authentic experiences, these conversations, for what it's worth, once it's there, right?
Yeah.
And then you get to decide whether or not you want to fucking judge me or not. But I'm really taking away any potential reservation against throwing a facade back up just because, you know what I mean? And, for me, doing business in the hospitality industry and all these other things, also doing business and, with big corporate clients and things like that, you know what I mean? Like, there's a certain level of risk associated with, do you really want to give business to that guy that has that kind of history or whatever, going to give you keys to $1 billion building or, you know what I mean? Like that type of thing. And, and eventually it just got to the point where it's like, what's more important to you? To be the master of the motherfucking universe, right, or the potential that these stories, these conversations could save lives? And I'm just at a point now where it's like, well, fuck it. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? Like, brung what you brung. Let's lay it all out there so people can know that here's us. Here we are, successful people dancing, right? But we've been to the edge, and here we are.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're behind the scenes suffering in silence, behind your fucking avatar of what you want the world to think you actually are versus the suffering of what you're really going through, there's solutions.
Yeah. And that's just the brand, that avatar. That's like, you know what I mean? That's
fucking
just what
right.
it is.
Fucking right. You know
and
what I mean?
If somebody elects to try to put their own stigma on me because they find out something about me, it doesn't mean that I am inclined to accept that stigma. That's their stigma. You know what I mean? Like, I am armed with the freedom from the life I used to live where like a stigma from somebody else can't hurt me, man. And it's like, I'm so grateful that I've been in that position where I just never really had to be coy about it or like whatever. Like if somebody, and you run into people all the time, and this is so fucking crazy, dude, that I do mortgages now because I sell other people's money to other people who are making the most emotional purchase of the largest asset they're ever going to own.
Right.
And I am the face of that for them.
Right.
And it's like 9 out of 10 of them know that I used to live outside and shoot dope.
Right.
Like, how fucking cool is that? Like, who gets that? Who gets to get that? You know? It's like, that is the coolest.
It's cool as fuck.
Part of it all. Because, I mean, you know, you go back, like, whoever got you your parents their mortgage or something like that. First off, in the church basements, I don't say what I do. Ever.
No, me
I
either.
never do. I mean,
Me
we
either.
walk the line, right?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
You know, it's important to me.
People know what I do because
Yeah,
I'm
course they do.
clearly I'm visible in the world at large. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
of what I do. But you know, once I get in there, you know, anonymity is
That's the sacred
you know what I mean?
space.
Like, yeah, that's a sacred space.
That's a sacred space. But so, you know, you go back in the day where, like, you know, whoever got my parents their mortgage or your, it's like you walk into a bank and there's some guy, well, I would say with probably similar glasses, honestly, because these are back in style now.
Some stiff.
You know,
Right,
button down,
right,
short
right,
sleeve,
right.
pens, you know, the whole
Right,
thing. And he's
right.
like, oh, let me see, you know, and it's like, and he's like a finance guy.
Right.
Like nowadays, you get to come to somebody like
Well,
me.
so but here's
who's
the
gonna
interesting
spice it
thing:
up.
is that finance guy, right, with the pens and the glasses, could have just as easily been one of us.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying that this is really all
Yeah,
about.
it's true.
Is we get an opportunity to leverage changing the stigma associated with, right? What that, because there are so many people out there that people are dealing with that are hiding behind the mask, and frankly, they may in fact represent more of a risk than people like you and I do.
Right.
Right? You know what I mean? They do in fact represent more of a risk because, you know, there's an unknown. There's a power in vulnerability and transparency.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? And doing this is a way for us to start to leverage that towards, hey, there's way more of us out there than you fucking realize, you know, running around trying to figure out like who you're going to do business with or who you're going to, you know, who you're going to commiserate with or who you're going to build relationships with. And that, you know, and there's a real true power in using this as a leveraging tool, right? So that we can get out the word that, you know what I mean? Like, look, you know what I mean? Like, not only is this, you know, like the volcano dance, so to speak, like the edge of where we've been, but this is what fucking life really looks like. That's fucking banging and awesome. And you know what I mean? And, you know, and look at me being like, truth, like I'd get a mortgage from you anyway. Right. But to hear the story about caves and all that other shit, and you go, wow, you know, this is a cat that stepped into a level of responsibility that most people would not.
Yeah.
You know, people that didn't have your history would have been like, nah, I can't really get down with, you know what I mean? Like, it speaks to the character of the person that you've become over time. And it's really fucking honor and a privilege to do this with you, bro.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. And I think it's easier for people like us to do, like, it's as seemingly hard as that, something like a decision like that is to make.
Right.
Especially for somebody who's like so fucking selfish like I am.
Right.
Like, I'm like, oh man, I guess I'm not gonna be able to buy the sneakers I want for the next couple of years. You know, like,
right.
It's also like it's easier for us to like jump out the window on such a crazy move like that because of where we come from.
Fucking right.
Because it's like, yeah, like this is gonna be hard, but like whatever. You know what I mean? Like considering where I've been, it's not gonna be that hard. Like it's gonna be good hard. It's not gonna be bad hard.
Right.
Like that life was bad hard. This is just like good hard, man. Like this is like, you know, taking care of.
It's where all the
else's
blessings
kids.
come from.
Yeah, it's like it's easier for us. We're set up and equipped better to make the crazy move, to do the thing that everybody says.
Well,
is
because from a contrasting perspective, what you've experienced is it's like a calibration tool.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a strange thing for recovery.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, when you've been to the edge, and there were a lot of things that weren't nearly as to the edge that seemed like to the edge at the time. But over time, you know, and especially exposure to things clean and with the step process behind it, I start to find myself relating back to, like I didn't really see it at first. Like every next thing that came up was a crisis.
Yeah.
Crisis,
Emergency.
right?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, you know what I mean? And then over time, you know, and with clarity and, you know, and deep exploration, you know, the living an examined life, you start to get to a point where you really start to see that, wait a minute, like my past history is I've been to the edge of the volcano a bunch of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And this really ain't that deep.
Right. Yeah. And it makes it possible. Like
Right.
it just makes it doing the impossible thing for me, which was stopping using drugs. Was
Fucking right.
The most impossible thing.
Fucking right. But without question, number one. Ding.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
of my entire
me too.
existence.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't ever want to lose sight of that, man. It's like that was the most impossible thing. So after that impossibility is now a tangible reality, other things that seem challenging are just like it's
Yeah.
Is it really?
Nearly.
Could
Not
it
nearly.
could it be
At
anywhere
first
near?
when I'm exposed to it,
Yeah.
right?
The
You know what I
shock
mean?
va-
Like
yeah.
the words come to, you know, come to believe,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, you know, come to accept, come to panic less, come to, like, you know what I mean? Like that acceptance is not linear. Like it's not like I'm like, oh, okay. Like first thing I'm like, oh shit. And then I'm like, wait a minute. And then I talk to a couple people and I lean into the process and a power greater than me and all these other things. And it equalizes a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But I have to clearly over and over again have to go through that process of, oh my God, what am I going to do? Wait a minute. You know what I mean? And then calibrating.
Yeah, I'll share this with you because this is like really. I had a sponsor along the way after the guy I was telling you about, which was his sponsor for a lot of years. It doesn't really matter. And he would always talk about the inventory steps, right? And
Right.
you could spend a fucking $1 million on self-help books and all kinds of shit,
Right.
to like find this stuff out. And similar language will be in there, and you can go and pay a bunch of money to sit on somebody's couch, and like similar language will be in there and stuff
Right.
like that. But like
Right.
I'm getting this game from a guy that used to like smoke coke on fucking 29th Street. You know what I mean? Like, and it's the inventory steps, right? It's like, you know, 1, 4, 7, and 10 to like actually
Right.
attach it to something.
Right.
And in every single scenario, good, bad, or indifferent, every single dilemma, every single like exciting possibility, it's like I always just throw 1, 4, 7, and 10 at it like immediately, and it's just like, one, what can I control here? What can I not? Right. So like whether it's becoming a parent overnight, becoming a husband, or still being one after all these years, whatever the dilemma is, you know. 4 is like, what is my part in this, whatever that is, like what's everything that's on my side of the street. 7, how am I or could I potentially fuck that up, right? Like where am I going to ruin this? Where are the corners where I can make this worse?
Right.
And then 10 is like, what am I going to do about it?
Right.
That's like with the set of information that and this takes, it's so quick. The snap was weak. You know what I mean? I got the.
Do you even really find that you categorize it? Because I find myself not really. The steps have become so much integrated in my life that I used to be like, let me tell you how, you know what I mean? Like, you know, I used to integrate steps and explain, and it's just gotten to a point where it's just become, I don't really, you know, aside from doing the things that I do every day, like, you know, the 10th and the 11th, I don't really even think so much about.
No, I don't.
No.
It's just those questions.
Yes,
I need those bits of information. To move forward. Basically.
I think the reason why I said that to you is because I've watched other people in their process, especially earlier on in their process, going through a lot of the same things that I went through. And it comes back to that whole, and for some odd reason, it sometimes sits, I sometimes find it a little bit difficult to palate. And I think in a way, because I went through the same thing, but you can't expect somebody to know what they don't know yet, or to have grown where they haven't grown yet.
Yeah.
And the hardest part for me sometimes is just, you know, not standing in the way of somebody going through exactly the same fucking process that I went through.
Yeah, you can't always pull them to the other side.
Spotted got it, makes you mad, got them bad. You know what I'm saying? Like there's that part where sometimes I'm just like, you know, let them talk about how, you know, these steps are tied to these other steps, and you know what I mean? And not really talk about who they are.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and to the point where you're like, all right, like I really need another, you know, walkthrough of your understanding of the step process, but I know nothing about, you know, the desperation that you're clearly going through right now, because you're sharing all these other things because you don't want to talk about what you're going through right now. And just allow somebody to, you know what I mean, like eventually reach another level of desperation where there's like this pivotal shift, and they realize that talking about these steps doesn't give you the same relief as pain shared is pain lessened.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then eventually, you know, and I've seen that happen with, oh my God, countless times where, you know, eventually at one point somebody went from, it's like, you know, like the vampire, you know what I mean? The human being dying, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's the dark side, but it's the light side, but they come to the other side, and then all of a sudden they're talking about their lives.
I have like an arc with that. Arc is like a popular term these days. People go on like a winter arc in the gym and shit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But I do, because people wanted to hear that. I would get a good reaction when I would do that.
Fucking right. Me
when
too.
I would break down, like, it would be like math. Or like
fucking right.
The gist of talking about the universe. Like I would do that because that's all I knew. That's all I knew was I could read it, I could decipher it.
And the reaction being as strong as it was, I was like, fuck yeah.
I
you know what I mean?
a lot.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
And then I started getting asked, you know, more and more to come share and do stuff like that. And, you know, I was like, you know, I was just like a popular pick there for like those early few years. You know what I mean? And then something happened to me, man. And,
do you think you're a less popular pick now that you're not as?
I think I'm less visible now. Yeah, I think that's part of it.
Me too.
And you know, it's like this is kind of where this was all going to go. It's like my life is like really good and uneventful, and that is less popular overall. Right. So something happened to me. No. Let me back that up. I involved myself. I created a situation.
I like the flow chart in that where it's like, oh no, wait, let me loop back a couple times. Right, there we go. Okay.
So I did like a no thing, right? Like I started dating somebody that was like pretty new.
Right.
And not that I wasn't, but I was over the imaginary line as far as where you're supposed to not do that yet. And you know, and like we started a whole life together, man. And eventually that girl used, and eventually that girl died, right?
Fucking right.
And you know, so I was getting asked a lot around that time, and after that, even when I was going through it, which at the time was like, it was actually probably helpful because it gave me like a more of a platform to like kind of just say it out loud and kind of decipher myself what I'm feeling, what I'm going through.
Right.
And then after that, I would get asked, and I'd be like, all right, cool, man. Like, what's the time? I'd be like, oh, let go or be dragged, or like love versus life. And every time I knew. You know what I mean? What it was. And I had a moment.
You think you were getting selected because of your history and people knew where you were coming from?
I knew exactly what they wanted me to tell.
They were like,
what they wanted me to say.
Yeah, okay.
And it was made clear by where I was getting placed and who I was getting placed with at these events.
Right.
At these conventions. At these
they were
things.
like, this cat's got a history with this, and this would be a real good cat.
Yeah, and he's good at weaving the story.
Right.
You know, he's going to get oohs and ahs, so then I can be the best speaker picker for the day, which is what I thought. And I'm like, at some point, so I'm in Brooklyn, right, and I got like the 10 p.m. slot, which is more people go that than they do like the main meeting. Yeah, you know what I mean. I'm 10 o'clock at night on a Friday, first night of the Brooklyn,
fresh out of the smoking area.
I mean, dude, and I was in the parking lot, and thank God I was like already dating my wife at the time. And I just like didn't feel right that whole day, man. Like I knew I had some bullshit tie. I knew what they wanted me to tell, but I was past. I was like, you know, I'm like here with my new girl that's gonna probably be my wife. I knew, and I was like in the parking lot talking to her, and I was like, yo, I feel like like a bad nervous. I feel like you should always feel nervous because the job is important, right?
Right.
But like that's what God's for, is to handle that part.
Right.
And I was like, yo, I want to just like leave. I don't even want to be here, man. Like all day, everything I sat in was just like better and better and better, and getting the oohs and the louder ahs. And I was just like, how am I going to measure? How am I going to do this? You know?
Right.
And she said something so profound to me. She was like, Paul, who gives a fuck? And that's why I married her. Because of shit like that. Because I'm like, that's Nietzsche, man. That's
who gives a fuck? That's Nietzsche.
I've
never
gold,
seen that Nietzsche, but that is gold.
You're not getting no better than that. She's
Right.
like, who gives a fuck, man? Like, we're gonna leave here together regardless of what you say. You know, how it goes.
Right.
And it hit me, and that she's like, why did they all like, you know, why, whatever, and it hit me that like, nobody really cared that is an experience that took a toll on me.
Right.
They just wanted to like get a reaction out of people through me. And when I learned that like, you guys aren't really my like friend. I'm a piece of meat to you. I'm the dancing banana, dude. You know, I'm the bear on the tricycle. You go on and on. Like I'm just up here for your entertainment purposes. Never considering
I'm the bear on the tricycle.
That I am an addict with the disease of addiction, right? Who experienced something quite traumatic on a lot of levels that took a lot of time to experience, because it wasn't a one night. It happened over months,
right?
And you know, and you're just using me to like just kind of run me out there in front of these people, and you know, I'm not too proud of it now, but I kind of let them have it, like 500 people. Like I basically went off on that system to them about how it made me feel and how I felt like, even though I'm here with you all, I am alone, and you're just using me as an instrument when you don't actually care about me. You just want me to tell a story that's going to get a good reaction. So of course that gets a great reaction, but that's beside the point. And I went on a I'm not doing this for a while.
Right.
And oh, you know, you got to say no, I don't. I don't have to do anything. You know, I got something I believe in, and I got a guy to guide me.
Right.
And so because you kind of mentioned like something about this earlier, is now it's different. Now it's like, you know, I have a very uneventful life. Like other than like my kids' cheer accomplishments, you know what I mean? And like refinishing my hardwoods. Like to me, it's sick.
Which is uneventful and probably the most eventful thing that you would ever possibly wish for.
Fucking dude, you pull up carpets in your bedroom. You've been living there 2 years.
I saw your carpet. I saw you. Yeah, I saw that.
You were like, at night on a Monday.
You were sporting wood in a bunch of different ways, my bro. You were like, oh my god, look at these hardwoods. And the funny thing was, I understood exactly where you were coming from.
Are the Eagles going back to the Super Bowl? That's what it felt like.
Yeah. It was like, look at these hardwoods. I know. That was fucking great, actually. I saw that shit.
Yeah, so now you know, to just kind of full circle that is like now, since I don't really get invited to those things anymore, which is fine with me.
Right. Right.
I have cheer on Saturdays anyway, you know,
Right.
so I can't come
You're
to
a
your
cheer
little
dad.
event. But it's just like, you know, now when I am called to do that job,
Right.
like you said a while, it's like, it's very different for me now. It's not a math
Right.
problem anymore.
Right.
It's like I have a wealth of experience now living this new way of life, right? Trying to figure it out every day. All
Right.
these new things that we get into, like, you know, new businesses,
Right.
new friends, I mean, just
Right.
you name it, it's fucking new,
Right.
right? Like, I've never been this old before, I've never been this fat before.
Yeah.
I've never, like,
Yes.
tried this and that before.
100%.
So it's just like, now I feel like I give more of my authentic self, and in every setting, not just that. That's where I learned it, was there. But now it's in every setting. I'm able to share more of my authentic self, regardless of how I would imagine it would be received. Almost to the point, not quite yet, but almost to the point where I've stopped imagining how it will be received. That will be the next level of freedom for me.
Right.
Is when I don't think about it anymore, you know, because it's still got its hooks in me.
Well,
you know?
this is like one of those things. Like, this exercise has been, at least in part, some of that on steroids.
Yeah.
Because these shares are much more in depth. They're much lengthier. They're much more transparent. They're, you know, the level of authenticity that's necessary to really get to the meat of the matter is, you know what I mean? And, you know, you know what, like, it's been an exercise where, I mean, I come out sometimes, I mean, I danced on the Volcano with Rich. I get the next day, I said to him, I said, I'm not sure I'm doing this anymore. Like, I was emotionally hungover, dude, because I went to the edge of the Volcano with him and danced. Well, you get to the other half of that thing, you'd be like, whoa, you know what I mean? That was intense. And we had to clip a couple parts, man, because it was heavy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And but I really realized that, you know what I mean? Like, this is the equivalent of, you know, emotional, spiritual weightlifting. Right? Doing this at this level, being this authentic for this long a period of time, and having these deep conversations with other people where we relate and we connect and we share history and background and, you know, successes and failures and all that other stuff. Like, this is something that, you know, that I don't get in the church basement. Right?
No.
You know what I mean? Like, this is because we can't possibly explore at that level, right? In that microcosm of time, right? And then the other thing too is that these conversations get to live on in perpetuity. Right. You know what I mean? Like, we can kind of like a speaker tape. I mean, you can refer back to what you sounded like then. And some of them I might be a little cringy about, like, ooh, I don't really like the way I sounded then.
It's just found a bunch of mine.
Right. Exactly.
We're doing the floors.
Right. Exactly.
Found a box.
But there's another part of me that's like, you know, like, who are we if not a repository of our past and our experience? And frankly, like, I can't see the growth. I've got selective amnesia. So, you know, like, this is a cross section of you and I now.
Yeah.
And it'll be really interesting at some point when we double back to this and we have a conversation years later.
Right.
Because I don't know whether this will last. I don't know how much time I've got left on this planet or you. But if we get an opportunity to do this again at a later point, we'll be at a different point.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And we'll be able to look back and say, well, here's a snapshot of where we were when.
Right.
And the other thing that's really cool too is other people will as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, you'll find that there'll be people who will watch this that will say, holy shit, Paul, I didn't know that about you.
Yeah.
Including people that know you really well. You know what I mean? Like, there'll be people that'll be like, holy shit. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know that part of your story. And, you know, there's two types of encouragement. There's the type of physical encouragement I give somebody else. You can do this too, right? You know what I mean? Keep coming, right? You can make it to midnight and not get high no matter what, just for today. You know what I mean? Like, there's those things. And then there's this other type of encouragement, and that's the encouragement when we share our lives and our stories with others, and they get to reflect back on that. Doesn't even require me to say a word to them.
Right.
And it lives on social media and YouTube or whatever, and, you know, 3, 4, 5 years from now. Remember we talked about the ripple effect?
Yeah.
Think about what fucking ripple effect this has, where somebody watches this and gets some hope 4 years from now.
Right.
Long after this discussion's ever really happened.
Right.
And I learned that from the first episode, because my first episode was my personal trainer, right, who, was thinking about killing himself because his best friend killed himself, and he's a triathlete, and he borrowed his friend's pants. He killed himself because of, a bunch of different things, drugs and otherwise. He said, and he tried to put his pants on, could go to the funeral, and it couldn't fit in him. He thought about killing himself too, right? You know what I mean? And it was like, and I realized that, Georgie came and was like, yo, dude, I need to get down. We started working out. Like, he watched the episode and you started realizing, wait, there's this ripple effect of, inspiration. And he didn't have to be here to hear it.
Right.
He saw that later.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow. So the fact that we can do this, create a ripple effect with what we do, to me, inspires me to do it. I'm like, fuck yeah. Like, let's drop this shit, and get it on tape and get it into a place where somebody months or years after we had this conversation could experience hope, hearing other people's experiences. Yeah. Right? You know what I mean? Can actually get something out of it. They go, wait a minute. Them two crazy fucks can stay clean and build a fucking life. Maybe I can too. Yeah. Right? Maybe I don't got to go to, spend 20 years in fucking the federal pen, or... Maybe I don't have, maybe I can call this the gift of desperation right here, say enough is enough, right? And, and start the painful and difficult process with getting clean, having the desire to slip away like a thief in the night, like it did for you and me. Mm-hmm. And then embark on the path of building a fucking fruitful, wonderful, fucking successful, life worth living.
Yeah. I mean, I think about now just even being this old, right? Like, I had in the past couple of years, I've turned 40, and I have 10 years clean now, right? So two major life reflective.
30 to 40 is big too. That's a pivotal, like, they're all big, but it gets real anyway. 30 to 40. 30 to 40 is like, suddenly you're like, oh shit. Yeah. Life is really lifey.
Life is really lifing. Big time. Because that's when you got to kind of make your, hey, now's the time. Yes. It's like, in your 40s.
And there are so many people that, they might come to the realization that life's getting lifey because they avoided it until they were in their 60s or 70s. Yeah. And then lifey is, lifey in you with their fucking boot in your back because, so it's important to get your story down, because there are people out there in their late 20s. Yeah. Who are going to hear your story and go, wait, you know what I mean? Like, and their life's clearly unmanageable, right?
That's where I was.
Right, exactly.
I was in my late 20s.
Yeah, right, and they're going to go, wait a minute. You know what I mean? Like, the ripple effect.
I was in my late 20s hoping I would die. Not enough to do anything about it. Like, you know what I mean? Right. I definitely didn't have any, like, extra money for, like, a pistol or anything. Right. Like, busy spending all that on
I sold
drums.
Mine. The only thing I had left was a lever action 30-30 that was upstairs. And a friend of mine who used to be one of my sponsees said, because I used to talk about how I want to shoot myself with my pistol, forgetting full on that the H&K had gone to cover some other expenses that I had. Yeah. So I was really, like, at the point where it was like, my friend said, he's a Marine vet, and he was like, you would have had to pull the trigger with your fucking toe. And I was like, and I thought to myself, I was like, yeah, that doesn't nearly sound as glamorous.
That's Kurt Cobain.
You know what I mean? That doesn't sound that, you know what I mean? I go, well, yeah, but the thought was there.
Right. So
I used to look at the Ben Franklin Bridge and be like, yo, if I jumped off that bad boy, would the water knock me out, or would I know I was drowning?
Yeah. So I was too much of a punk. I'll use that word. Right. To do anything about it.
Me too.
I wanted that result, because I didn't want to feel like that anymore, man. I just wanted it to be over. So I would do enough and be like, this one has to be enough to kill. It has to be. Right. And then I'd come out of it and be like, motherfucker, dude. Right. Not again. And this went on for so long at the end. And then I remember there was this guy in my neighborhood. This is like a story. This is worth telling. So this guy in my neighborhood, his name's Ed. Ed was like, I don't know, maybe 10 years older than us. And it was crackhead Ed, man. I mean, Ed was always getting into some shit. He lived with his parents. He didn't work. Like, he would, like, get us booze when we were kids. Like, you might catch Ed walking down the street with, like, somebody's exhaust on his shoulder. You know what I mean? And I remember my mom saying to me one time that, like, yo, what if you don't die? Like,
you're going to be like Ed.
You are. Like, you are crackhead Ed to the kids that are 10 years younger than you. Like when you're 29 and you're seen every day, clearly jobless during work hours,
Right.
in your pajamas, smoking cigs, detoxing outside of your mom's house, and the 19-year-old in the neighborhood, you're his crackhead Ed. Like, that's who you are. Like, and it dawned on me that we are not promised the relief of death. Like, jail's instituted in death, like, for sure, man. Like, I'm all down for that. But, like, what about living forever like that? Like, you know what I mean? It's not just to save your life from death. It's to save your life from that life extended.
It's almost like a life worse than death.
It absolutely is. It's purgatory, man. It's like you're never going to get anywhere up or down. We just went and cried in the bathroom together off camera for a couple minutes. Right. Just a couple of tough guys.
We had to hold each other's codpiece, though. We won't talk about that.
A couple of tough guys crying. It's not a big deal. An adventure.
Yeah. So, man, this was fantastic, brother.
This is great, man. I mean? The whole thing in here is just like, this is just like really fucking cool, dude. And I'm like a 41-year-old like tail end of Gen X kid, so sometimes I don't know how to describe things with the level that they deserve. So sometimes I just say things are really fucking cool. Right. And this is just like cool as shit that you're doing this.
Yeah, this is there was like a vision behind it. I wasn't really sure exactly what it was going to be. You know what I mean? It was kind of like loosely cobbled together, but I had like some inspiration, and I was in here like drilling holes in this table and running wires and making it all like clean and you know what I mean? And all this other stuff and buying equipment and, you know, and so, you know, this was kind of like, there was a process to get to this process.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, and conceptually, even that part was like, you know, what is this really going to be? What are we going to talk about? What's this going to be really all about?
Yeah.
But this was valuable. You know what I mean? The conversation was banging.
Yeah, it was good.
You know, and I love you and appreciate you, brother.
Same, man.
You know what I mean? Like, this was really cool.
Same. I was saying to him, I felt like, because I looked at the time and was like, holy shit, like we've been here for, it's like a casino, right? Like you're just like, there's no windows. You don't know how long we've been doing.
You're meant to time warp.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I was like, is this like long compared to previous, like whatever? And I was just like, yeah, to me, this isn't even like we're doing like a thing. No. It's just like, I like Jimmy. I don't get to see him all the time. Right. Like this could easily be the fucking Broad Street Diner at 1 in the morning after the 11th hour. Right. Like this could easily
Except
be that.
We would have all those other distractions that would get in the way.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the reason why, you know, building this studio space and no windows and the way it's really set up.
Right.
You know, and frankly, you know, all the other little things, you know, the lo-fi and the headphones, you know what I mean? Like all that other stuff is just meant so that we can relax and really have a conversation without, you know, distractions getting in the way. And,
yeah, man.
You know what I mean? And, you know, this represents a lot of time out of your life and your lifestyle, especially with your, you know, wife and, you know, little one at home and, you know, being a cheer dad and all that other stuff. So I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate you. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it, man.
And, you know, and I think if, you know, there's an old saying that says if this helps at least one person, we've done our job.
Absolutely.
But I think it helped you and I. So I think we're already ahead of the game.
Winning.
Right. So, you know, so if somebody else comes into this and says, wow, this was really cool and I got something out of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Then, you know, if they see some hope or some inspiration of, you know, what the dance looks like, or they can at least get off the edge of the volcano, then, you know, head of the game.
Yeah. Or just have your fucking party up there, man. Like if that's how your life is and that's how it feels sometimes, like you got to embrace that too. You know, like even if it's unsettled, if it's like, even if you feel like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like I often feel, cause I'm always in like uncharted territory.
Me too.
It's like, even if there is a fucking volcano under you or like some potential eruption of a situation or a life thing or whatever, like, fuck it, man. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to like it doesn't have to bring everything around you down, crumbling on top of your head.
You can make a decision right now.
Right now. Like you don't even know how that's going to go. Right. Like, I mean, to really like, you know, kind of probably overplay the volcano metaphor is like, how many volcanoes are there that could potentially erupt that never fucking do? Right. You know what I mean? Right. Like, so it's just like, dude, until it does, man.
Fucking right.
And when it does, you're not even going to know.
Fucking right.
Doesn't even matter. You know? So appreciate you, man. This was awesome.
Let me get there.
Yeah,
We go.
yeah, I didn't want to move the mic.
That's okay. We moved the mic. That's
Yeah.
totally cool, brother. I love you, man.
Love you too, bro. This was
so that's
awesome.
Dancing on a Volcano, episode 5. Jim DiNardo and Paul Collins. Here we go. Get the
Good to shout out my
we go.
wife.
Shout
She
out.
got
There we
mentioned
go.
100 times.